Everyone grew up hearing that fairy tales are just bedtime stories for kids. Little Red Riding Hood, the Three Little Pigs, the Big Bad Wolf, it all sounds harmless. But what if those creatures were real and living among us, disguised as a mailman, a lawyer, or maybe even that strange neighbor down the street? That's exactly where Grimm comes in. The show took the classic police procedural format and mixed it with the darker, more violent side of folklore. In this world, Detective Nick isn't chasing regular criminals. He's hunting what we always believed were just myths. I know, I've talked about this show before, but let's be real, that video was way too rushed, and you all called me out in the comments big time. So, because the fan response was overwhelming, I decided to come back and do it right. This time, no shortcuts, no skipping ahead. Today, we're doing the ultimate recap. We're breaking down the full journey, covering every single episode, every creature, every twist, every dark turn. So get ready, because we're about to find out how an ordinary cop became the most feared hunter in the supernatural world. Here we meet Sylvie, a girl who just wanted to enjoy her run in the woods with the music blasting at full volume. Terrible idea. She finds a bizarre figurine on a log and, seconds later, becomes a statistic at the hands of a creature that leaves pieces of her scattered all over the place. Cut to Detective Nick, who is in a romantic phase, buying an engagement ring. The problem is, he starts having hallucinations, random people on the street morphing into monster faces. At home, he gets a surprise visit from his Aunt Marie, who arrives in a trailer full of suspicious junk. She drops the bomb. Their family hunts monsters. They are Grimms, and he is next in line. Before Nick can process the info, his aunt is attacked by a troll-like creature wielding a giant scythe. Nick saves the day, but she ends up in a coma at the hospital, leaving him a mysterious key and the warning, "Don't trust anyone." While trying to digest the fact that his life has turned into a dark fantasy RPG, Nick investigates the disappearance of a little girl in a red hoodie. The reference is obvious, right? He fixates on a suspicious mailman and ends up meeting Monroe, a werewolf, a Blootbud, who is reformed, does Pilates, and becomes the best partner he could ask for. Monroe helps track down the kidnapper mailman using some questionable natural sense. They find the villain's house, where a tactical rescue goes down. The mailman turns into a monster right in front of Hank, who doesn't understand a thing, but opens fire anyway. In the end, someone tries to take Aunt Marie out in the hospital with a lethal injection, proving that Nick's life will never be the same. Elsewhere, a Bonnie and Clyde-style couple breaks into a secluded cabin in the woods to party, raid the owner's pantry, and unwind. But the house belongs to the Raid family, and let's just say they don't like visitors. The boyfriend gets caught, and the girlfriend flees in desperation, seeing shadows that look like furious bears. Nick and Hank investigate the break-in and discover that the Raid family is into tribal artifacts and bear claws for decor. Their son Barry and his biker friends are actually Jaeger bars, bears that turn humans into sport in a ritual called Rohats, basically the Hunger Games, but furrier. At the hospital, Aunt Marie wakes up briefly to warn Nick that there is an organization of Reapers who want the heads of Grimms. Nick asks Monroe, who is none too pleased about it, to guard his aunt. The werewolf ends up having to lay a beatdown on some assassins who show up. In the woods, Nick discovers that the bear father, Frank, is civilized and didn't know his son was playing hunter. The two team up to stop the massacre. At the climax, the mother bear, who was the mastermind behind the crime and a total psychopath, falls into a spiked pit trap made by her own son. Instant karma. But it's not all sunshine and roses. An assassin disguised as a priest enters Aunt Marie's room at the hospital. She fights like a warrior to the end, forcing the guy to kill himself, but she succumbs to her wounds. Nick now officially inherits the trailer, the books, and the burden of being the last Grimm in the area. The episode kicks the door down with a flash mob playing YMCA on a streetcar. Everyone is dancing happily until a lawyer, Serena, drops dead, swollen like a pufferfish. The cause of death? A massive dose of bee venom. Nick starts investigating and realizes that bees are acting strange around him, almost like pets. He discovers they are mellifers, creatures that act like nature's Twitter, warning of imminent danger. And the danger has a name. Adelind, that blonde lawyer who tried to kill his aunt. We find out that Adelind is a hexenbeast, sort of a witch with a corpse-like face, and the bees just want to do the favor of eliminating the competition. The problem is that Nick, being a cop, has to protect the villain. When Rose shows up to explain that this is an ancient war and that the swarm is there to send a message, everything culminates in a massive bee attack at a hotel and later at an abandoned paper mill. Nick corners the bee leader Melissa, who tries to kill Adeline to protect the Grimm from something worse that is coming. Hank arrives in the middle of the chaos without understanding anything, almost becomes a target, and Nick is forced to shoot Melissa to save his partner. Adeline flees. At home, Nick gets stung by a solitary bee, just a reminder that in this world, no one is safe. Here, things start off tense. A woman breaks a window and flees barefoot, looking like she walked out of a horror movie. She gets hit by a car, but the real problem is the mysterious guy who takes advantage of the confusion to finish the job, while the driver calls 911. When Nick and Hank arrive, forensics notice something bizarre. Her feet are intact, but there is glass in her arm. Nothing makes much sense. We soon discover there's a Reaper in town, a sinister guy with a scythe who isn't here to play games. Meanwhile, the detectives get to Billy Capra, the owner of an isolated bed and breakfast that looks like a slasher movie set. The guy raises toads in the garden and, worse, eats them whole. Nick sees his true face and realizes he isn't human. The plot thickens when we find out Billy is a Zegavolk, a creature that releases pheromones capable of making any woman, and even men, fall for him. Basically, the guy is a walking love potion, and uses this to keep women in his basement. Hank decides to investigate alone, and of course, it goes south. He ends up trapped in a gas trap. Nick has to race against time to save his partner and the victims. Meanwhile, Captain Renard, Nick's boss, shows who really runs this town. He confronts the Reaper and slices the guy's ear off with his own scythe. Bizarre and stylish. In the end, Billy tries to escape using his pheromones but gets run over by a bus. Instant karma. The irony? The paramedic treating the villain starts falling in love with him right there on the pavement. Imagine mixing electronic music, classical violins, and rats. Lots of rats. It all starts when a music teacher is found dead in his car. Nick and Hank go to investigate, and the prime suspect is Roddy, a prodigious but troubled student who was recently expelled. When they arrive at the kid's house, his father freaks out and turns into a giant rat, a Reinigan. The father gets arrested, but Roddy has a perfect alibi. He is the masked DJ and was playing at a rave at the time of the crime. But the drama doesn't end there. We get a Romeo and Juliet style situation between Roddy and Sarah, a violinist from the popular crowd who constantly bullies him. Nick asks Monroe for help. After all, artists understand artists. Monroe gives the kid some brotherly advice, but Roddy is out for blood after his father gets hurt in jail. The kid decides to get revenge, luring the group that bullied him to a warehouse. The scene turns into a Pied Piper of Hamelin nightmare. Roddy plays the violin, and a horde of rats obeys the music to attack the rich kids. Hank arrives firing shots in the air to scatter the vermin, and Nick saves the girl. In the end, the students admit they framed Roddy to get him expelled, and the police let the kid go because no one would believe a police report mentioning mind control of rats via classical music. We meet Hap, a confirmed bachelor and a bit of a slob who is trying to exercise with one of those ridiculously shaking weights. And believe it or not, that object saves his life. When he goes outside to retrieve the weight that flew out the window, his house explodes. Nick discovers that Hap is a blutbud, meaning a wolf, just like Monroe. Since the guy's house turned to ash, Monroe is forced to host Hap, his childhood friend, turning the situation into a weird werewolf sitcom. But the piece ends when Angelina shows up. She is Hap's sister, Monroe's ex-girlfriend, and completely psychotic. She and Monroe have, let's say, a wild relapse in the woods, killing rabbits and howling at the moon. The plot becomes a dark retelling of The Three Little Pigs, but in reverse. The police arson investigator, Lieutenant Orson, is actually a Bauerschwein, a pigman, and is eliminating the wolves to avenge his brothers. Orson kills Hap with a silenced pistol, and war is declared. The climax happens at Orson's house, where he was relaxing in a mud bath. Seriously. Angelina arrives to kill him, wolf's out, and a brawl ensues. Nick gets caught in the crossfire, and remembering the Grimm books, hits a pressure point on Angelina's spine to stop her. Orson shoots her, but the wolf manages to flee into the woods. In the end, the pig goes to jail, and Monroe is left alone on the porch, listening to his ex's howls in the distance. Tragic and animalistic. A couple is enjoying a hike in full Blue Lagoon style, but the romantic mood ends quickly when they run into an armed drug dealer. The guy is about to send them to the afterlife, but he hears a strange noise. Suddenly, a rope, or rather, something looking like a rope, pulls the bandit into the brush. The couple takes advantage of the confusion and the fact that a shadow is attacking the guy to get out of there as fast as possible. Nick and Hank arrive at the scene and see that the dealer has been turned into a rag doll. They find a long strand of brown hair on the victim's bald body. Nick, searching the area, runs into what looks like Bigfoot, but is actually a wild blutbud, Jungle Book style, who flees growling. Things get tense when the dead dealer's brothers decide to play detective and kidnap one of the hikers, thinking he stole their money. Nick, lost in this mess, asks Monroe for help, who is all decked out in Christmas spirit. Monroe explains that a lost Vesson child in the woods can survive and become a complete beast. They discover the beast is Holly, a girl who went missing 9 years ago. Monroe and Nick find Holly's hideout in a treehouse, Tarzan style. She is injured and scared, but Monroe uses his wolf charm to calm the girl down. However, the dealer's brothers show up to ruin everything. When push comes to shove and the shooting starts, Holly shows she is no damsel in distress. She uses her mile-long braid, like a killer Rapunzel, to strangle one of the bandits and save the day.
I don't know where.
In the end, there is an emotional reunion with her mother, but when identifying the suspect who kidnapped her years ago, her eyes glow red. The girl left the wild, but the wild didn't leave her. A judge is working late when a maniac breaks into his house and game over for his honor. The killer isn't messing around and leaves a fingerprint belonging to a guy who is already dead and missing a hand. Hank realizes this reeks of revenge from an old case of his. The killer is Oleg Stark, and Monroe explains that the creature is a Siegbarst, basically a Shrek-like ogre, but with titanium bones and zero sensitivity to pain. In other words, an evil Hulk. Stark wants to get everyone who put him in jail, and Hank is on the list. Nick searches Aunt Marie's trailer and finds a massive elephant gun. But before he can prepare, the ogre invades Nick's house. The protagonist gets beaten badly, but his girlfriend proves she isn't just set dressing. She throws a pot of boiling water in the monster's face, saving her boyfriend's skin. With Nick on the sidelines all broken up, Hank decides to play the lone hero and set an ambush for Stark, ignoring any safety plan. Terrible idea. Nick warns Monroe, who needs to prepare a bullet with a super rare poison that calcifies the ogre's bones. At the quarry, Hank tries to face the monster Rambo style, but his normal bullets just tickle him. Stark is about to crush the detective with a concrete block, but Monroe appears camping on the hill. He sets up the old rifle and lands a perfect shot, turning the villain into a statue and exploding him from the inside. Hank is left wondering where the miracle came from, and Monroe slips away as if nothing happened. Just another normal day in Portland. We have an angry guy in a parking lot who kills another with a screwdriver, and out of nowhere, the victim's face suddenly changes into that of an old man. Nick and Hank investigate this crime and stumble into a neighborhood feud worthy of a soap opera involving Lenny, Natalie, Marty, and Mason. It's that classic messy love square. Nick realizes that Marty transforms into a rat-like creature, while Mason turns into a snake-like one. It is literally a real-life episode of Tom and Jerry, only with murders.
So are you.
Monroe explains that these species are natural enemies, which makes it clear things are going to go wrong. Meanwhile, Juliet is playing detective and writes down the license plate of a suspicious woman lurking around their house. Things go completely off the rails for Marty. He has serious daddy issues, like seeing his father in everyone, and ends up snapping. He kills Mason, kidnaps Natalie, and thinks he's on a romantic date, assaulting strangers in a restaurant thinking they are his father. A true falling down moment. Nick and Hank manage to corner the human rat in a cluttered shop and arrest the guy, who is completely hallucinating. In the meantime, Monroe goes to fix a clock in a tower and ends up ambushed by a gang of Vesson. He gets beaten badly, and later reveals to Nick that he was attacked by a Vesson's group just for helping a Grimm. Nick tries to push his friend away to protect him, but Monroe is a real ride-or-die pal and says he won't budge, promising to be ready for the next fight. That's true friendship. In the forest, the mood is tense, Hunger Games style. Two teenagers run desperately from creatures that look like vultures. Steven, one of them, falls into the river and meets a horrible fate. Meanwhile, Nick is having coffee with Monroe and drops the bomb. He wants to tell Juliet he's a Grimm. Monroe, sensible as always, gives it to him straight. That's asking to ruin the relationship and traumatize the girl. Steven's body washes up on the riverbank, pale and bloodless, as if he met a very thirsty vampire. The only clue is a necklace and signs that someone drained his blood with needles. Definitely not an accident. Things get more bizarre when Nick investigates a car accident. Inside the vehicle, there were insulated coolers containing blood and organs. The driver dies and transforms into a Geyer, the Vulture Man. Monroe explains the macabre logic. Human organs act like potent steroids for Vessan creatures. Nick convinces Monroe to buy a human bladder on the black market to set a trap. Following the clues, they discover a suspicious medical clinic that kidnaps street peoples. Gracie and Hanson, two siblings Nick was trying to protect, are taken for surgery. Nick goes full Rambo mode and raids the cabin in the woods with SWAT. There's a shootout, a chase, and the villainous surgeon gets what she deserves. She falls into a bonfire. The children are saved. In the end, Renard receives a nice package, a ear, and a threatening call from the Reapers, warning that if he doesn't control his Grimm, they will solve the problem their way. In a fancy art gallery, Ryan tries to play the player with a mysterious brunette named Lena. He even shows his monster face to impress her, but the spell backfires. When he attacks, Lena reveals herself to be a terrifying giant spider, and he ends up being dinner. At home, Nick and Juliet have their house egged. Nick chases the boys and sees that one of them transforms into a beaver. Monroe explains that Grimms are like the boogeyman to these creatures. The police find Ryan's body completely dry, as if he had been sucked out from the inside with a straw. And there's a disgusting detail. Nick finds a finger that is still moving on its own. Nick decides to lay down the law in the neighborhood. He goes to the Beaverman's house and acts like a mobster, making it clear that if they mess with him or Juliet, there will be hell to pay. The investigation points to Lena, who leads a double life, serial killer and dedicated mother. Monroe takes Nick to a monster asylum to understand better. They encounter a Spinatod, a black widow, who explains that they must drain the youth from men to keep themselves from aging prematurely. Nick catches Lena in the act, trying to claim another victim on a boat. In a moment of pure irony, he traps the Spider-Woman in a fishing net. The episode ends on a sad note. Lena's daughter already shows signs that she will follow in her mother's footsteps, trapped in an endless cycle. Meanwhile, an elderly couple in an isolated cabin is brutally attacked by Dimitri, a fugitive monster. Nick and Hank arrive at the scene and find clues that don't add up. Horse tracks and a clandestine fighting arena hidden in a warehouse. It's basically Fight Club, but with monsters and medieval weapons. Blood and Latin on the floor confirm this is serious business. Monroe, the series MVP, goes undercover to investigate. He contacts a bookie, but ends up kidnapped and thrown into a cage next to Dimitri. The villain is eating raw flesh, and Monroe almost vomits seeing the previous victim's tattoo on the meat. Renard discovers who runs the fights, a guy named Leo, and orders him to stop. Leo refuses, thinking he has more authority than royalty. Royalty? Is Renard of royal blood? When the fight starts, Monroe is thrown into the arena to be turned into mincemeat. Nick arrives just in time, but instead of just arresting everyone, he enters the ring to save his friend. The crowd goes wild. A Grimm fighting a Vessan in the arena. Nick lays the smackdown and wins, proving he's a tough cookie. Meanwhile, Juliet has prepared a romantic birthday dinner and is left waiting alone. She even finds the engagement ring Nick bought but puts it back, upset. The relationship is hanging by a thread. In the end, Renard shows he isn't playing around. He sends a priest, yes, an assassin priest, to execute Leo for disobeying. The captain does not forgive. Meanwhile, a trio of thieves, the Shackles, going crazy in a jewelry store. They burst in firing automatic rifles, but the shop owner, Sam, decides to have a peculiar snack. He swallows a box of gold coins before dying. When Nick and Hank arrive, they find the guy's body looking like a sieve and the safe empty. But this wasn't a common robbery. It was a professional job. While the dead man's accomplices try to figure out where the coins went and end up killing each other in a confused shootout due to mistrust, we discover that these are no ordinary coins. They are the coins of Zakynthos, which give absurd charisma to whoever possesses them. Nick discovers these same coins are linked to his parents' death, and who ends up getting their hands on them? None other than Captain Renard. The guy gets so addicted to the power of the gold that he dreams he is a dictator being acclaimed by a crowd in Portland. The HUD continues for the last surviving thief, Soledad Marquesa. There is a chase in a hotel and then a confrontation in the garage where Captain Renard, full of magical confidence, enters the shootout. Nick manages to recover the coins but realizes they are too dangerous to remain in circulation. He hides the treasure in the trailer, but not before checking out a vintage film reel that came with the package. And then, my friends, the plot twist is historic. The footage shows the art guy giving a speech with the coins on his lapel and, amazingly, transforming into a blutbud. Two copper thieves think they've hit the jackpot in an abandoned warehouse, but what they find is a barbecue. A living flamethrower turns the guys into charcoal. Nick and Hank investigate and discover it wasn't gasoline but something much hotter and faster. The culprit is Fred Eberhardt, a homeless man who is actually a Damonfeuer, a type of human dragon that breathes fire.
I can't breathe.
Things get complicated when Nick goes after the suspect's daughter, Ariel. She not only realizes he is a Grimm, but goes on the offensive, literally. She grabs Nick, makes a scene for Juliet to hear over the phone, and creates chaos in the protagonist's relationship. Not content with being the homewrecker, Ariel kidnaps Juliet and takes her to a cave, or rather, the dragon's lair, for a family gathering with her hot-headed father. Nick needs help from Monroe, who improvises using an old streetcar to get to the location. While Monroe saves the damsel, Nick faces the dragon in a tense fight, dodging flames and using copper bars as weapons. He manages to impale the villain, saving the day. Ariel, dramatic as always, gives a poetic speech and throws herself into a fire tornado, pretending to die, but we later see she escaped. In the end, Juliet is traumatized and questions if she can handle her boyfriend's dangerous life. Unaware she almost became Dragon Barbecue, the witch Adeland is back in the kitchen, but not to bake a cake for the school fair. She bakes cookies laced with her own blood and hanks in a sinister love potion. Meanwhile, two junkies addicted to J, a drug made from fungus that is a painkiller for Vesson and poison for humans, break into the spice shop. The owner, Freddy, tries to fight back but ends up murdered. It's a sad moment, but it serves to introduce Rosalie, his sister, who arrives in town and discovers Nick is a Grimm but decides to trust him. Adeline's plan goes terribly wrong, or right depending on the comedic point of view. Hank loves the cookies, to the point of never sharing them with anyone, but Sergeant Wu, always hungry, steals one and eats it. The result? His face swells bizarrely, and he starts hallucinating that everyone's skin is melting. Rosalie and Monroe have to race against time to make an antidote with chyme extract before Wu breaks down completely. Nick and Monroe track down Freddy's killers to a Vesson opium den, and a basic reckoning ensues. Rosalie decides to stay in Portland and reopen her brother's shop, which is great news for the team. The episode closes with Wu cured, but with a curious side effect to say the least. He starts ripping out and eating the stuffing from his own sofa, and Hank? He continues having romantic dreams about Adeland, proving that the spell is taking effect. Nick is ready to propose to Juliet, but he picks the worst possible weekend for it. He takes his girlfriend to an isolated cabin in Whispering Pines. Speaking of neighbors, we meet Tim and Robin, but they aren't a happy couple. Tim is abusive, keeping his wife imprisoned and feeds her, believe it or not, worm juice through a tube. The reason? Robin is a Zeltenvogel, a rare bird that once in a lifetime produces an egg of pure gold in its throat. Tim is fattening his wife up like livestock to get rich. Meanwhile, in Portland, Hank keeps falling for Adeland's charms, and Sergeant Wu begins exhibiting the most bizarre behavior of the series. He eats paper clips and dreams of devouring his own sofa. Back at the cabin, the situation escalates quickly. Robin manages to escape, but Tim kills her accomplice and captures her again. Nick, playing the hero, breaks into the neighbor's house, discovers the golden egg scheme, and saves Robin, except the egg is choking her. Without being a doctor, Nick performs emergency surgery guided via FaceTime by Monroe and Rosalie. In the final confrontation, Tim and the local sheriff, who is also corrupt, try to recover the egg, but Nick throws the stone into the air. Tim desperately tries to catch it and ends up arrested. The egg breaks and turns to dust. But the hardest blow comes at the end. At home, Nick finally asks for Juliet's hand, and she refuses. She feels he is hiding too much. Soldier down. Nick's life turns upside down. While he tries to decipher mysterious maps with ancient keys, Captain Renard is cleaning up loose ends with the Vesson Mafia, even killing his own cousin. But there's a more pressing urgency. Hank is completely under Adeline's spell. Sergeant Wu is eating rugs, coins, and lip balm. The diagnosis is pica, an eating disorder caused, in this case, by black magic. Monroe and Rosalie discover that the only cure for Hank is to kill the Hexen beast responsible. But since Hank and Adeland have already, well, crossed the line, the standard cure won't work. Now, only the blood of a Grimm can break the spell. Nick sets up a not-so-romantic date with Adeline at a cemetery. She woges into a monster and attacks, but Nick has a gross yet brilliant plan. In the middle of the fight, he plants a kiss on her mouth, forcing her to bite his lip and swallow his blood. The effect is immediate. The Hexenbeast spirit dies. Adeline becomes a regular human, stripped of her powers, which for her is a fate worse than death. She flees in tears, rejected by both her mother and Renard, who discard her like trash. Hank wakes up from the trance completely confused, and Nick returns to his mysteries in the trailer with another win and more enemies on his tab. It looks like Rosalie's past is wilder than we thought. Ian, an ex-boyfriend of hers and a leader in the Vesson resistance, shows up in town shot, fleeing from Edgar Waltz, an elite assassin for the Virat. Monroe, of course, is dying of jealousy seeing Rosalie tending to her revolutionary ex. Waltz isn't just any villain. The guy is elegant, lethal, and plays dirty. He kills witnesses without mercy and uses police bureaucracy to hunt Ian down. Nick tries to mediate a fake truce, but realizes you can't negotiate with this type of person. Things get personal when Waltz discovers the spice shop and takes Rosalie hostage. He gives an ultimatum: hand over Ian or Rosalie dies. Nick and Monroe have to improvise a tactical partnership. They storm the shop with a risky plan. Nick enters pretending to surrender Ian while Rosalie provides the perfect distraction. Chaos ensues. Waltz tries to shoot, but Ian is faster and sends the villain to the afterlife. In the end, Nick makes a decision that goes against his badge. Instead of arresting Ian, he provides fake passports and lets the resistance leader escape. The Grimm has chosen his side in the coming war, leaving Captain Renard and the police with just a body and a lot of unanswered questions. Nick decides it's time to farm XP and train his Grimm abilities in the forest, using a medieval arsenal that would make any RPG player jealous. Monroe helps with the training, but gives it to him straight. Nick needs to improve his stealth because he's reeking more than cheap cologne. Meanwhile, a brutal crime happens in the city. A troll construction tycoon, Sal, decides the best way to fire an employee is with wet cement. A humanoid beaver, Arnold, sees everything and runs for his life. The investigation leads Nick to the community of the Ice Beavers, super anxious and fearful creatures who look like they've had too much coffee. Nick tries to act diplomatically, but things get complicated when two Reapers from Germany arrive. These guys are like the Nazgul of the Vesson world, and they want Nick's head on a platter. Amidst all this, a mega awkward dinner takes place at Nick's house, where he and Monroe have to invent crazy stories so Juliet doesn't get suspicious. Back in action, Sal tries to sell Nick out to the foreign assassins. The Beaver community democratically votes to be cowards and not help, leaving Nick alone against the villains. The fight is insane. Nick uses a battle mace and even cuts off a villain's head accidentally while dodging a strike. Monroe arrives at the end to secure the win, proving two scythes are better than one. Nick mails the villains' heads as a warning and earns the eternal gratitude and a pantry full of gifts of the Beavers. The episode starts with a classic Ponzi scheme going wrong and rich people losing everything. Arthur, who went broke, goes to ask Mavis for money. She refuses and shortly after dies in a bizarre way. A sonic scream that explodes her eyes and ears. It looks like a B horror movie, but it's just another Tuesday in Portland. Nick investigates this family, which is basically a twisted version of Cinderella, dead stepmother, greedy sisters, and poor Lucinda. Suspicion falls on Spencer, the family handyman who transforms into a bizarre bat creature, Murcielago. But the plot twist hits hard. The real killer is the angel-faced Lucinda. She's the sonic monster and is killing everyone who treated her poorly. Spencer, in a questionable act of loyalty, takes the blame and runs, but in reality, he wants to stop her from killing the last sister. Nick and Monroe discover that to beat the scream, they need noise. They grab a Murcielago matraca, a noisy crank contraption that looks straight out of a cartoon. In the final battle, Spencer tries to stop Lucinda, but the family drama ends in Shakespearean tragedy. He kills her with his sonic scream, but she still has the strength to bite his jugular. In the end, two bodies remain, leaving a very difficult explanation for Captain Renard, who stares at the crank looking like he isn't paid enough for this. A group of Bigfoot hunters thinks they hit the jackpot in the forest, but end up finding death. Nick and Hank arrive at the crime scene thinking it's an animal attack, but the footprints are too human. Meanwhile, Monroe wakes up with an intruder in his house. It's Larry, a Walderman friend who is freaking out and dying, with a drug pump shoved into his neck. Things get tense when police dogs track the scent to Monroe's house. In a heroic bro move, Monroe puts on his friend's sweaty shirt and runs into the forest to throw the police off the trail. The plan works, but almost goes south. Hank sees Monroe transformed and is traumatized, thinking he's losing his mind. Larry ends up dying at the house, revealing that a quack therapist, Dr. Brinkerhoff, is drugging Vesson to try and cure their animal side. Spoiler, it's not working and is turning them into murderous monsters. The therapist, realizing the jig is up, injects the drug into himself and turns into a furious monster in the middle of a fancy party, causing mass panic. Nick and Hank chase the Bigfoot to a theater. In the final confrontation, Hank, still doubting his own sanity, puts a bullet in the creature. When the monster dies and reverts to human form right in front of him, Hank's mind is blown. Juliet confirms via DNA tests that Bigfoot might be real, and the episode ends with Hank questioning everything he knows about reality. Hank wakes up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, like a horror movie protagonist after seeing the boogeyman. He's still traumatized by what he saw in the forest, and Nick realizes his partner is holding it together by a thread. Monroe, always the voice of reason, warns that normal people don't handle the supernatural well, but Nick insists on thinking everything is fine. Meanwhile, there's a new player on the board, Kimura. The guy is dangerous, has an invincibility tattoo on his head, and is cleaning house, killing detectives and searching for the magic coins. Nick discovers this guy isn't just linked to the Reapers, but also to his parents' death. The heat turns up, but the real bombshell comes from Adeland. The blonde is out for blood and prepares a plan worthy of a telenovela villain. She poisons a cat and gives it to Juliet to take care of. The result? A totally not suspicious scratch on Nick's girlfriend. Nick gets home and sees the wound on Juliet's hand. Despair hits. He decides enough with the secrets and takes her to the trailer to tell her everything, but Juliet is skeptical, thinking he's lost it. As a last resort, he takes her to Monroe's house. The good guy Wolf transforms to prove the truth, but Juliet can't handle the shock and passes out before processing the info, falling into a coma with black eyes. To cap off the chaos, Nick returns home and runs into Kimura. A brawl breaks out. Nick fights with hatred in his heart, but the villain is tough. When things look grim, a mysterious woman dressed in black appears, fighting like Black Widow. She takes Kimura down, and when Nick points his gun, she drops the bomb. It's his mother, whom everyone thought had been dead for 18 years.
Nick. Nicky. It's me.
A ship arrives in Portland carrying the kind of cargo nobody wants, bodies and a monster on the loose. It's a Mauvais Dentist, a sort of jacked up saber-toothed tiger that makes mincemeat of security. At Nick's house, the family drama is in full swing. His mother Kelly explains she faked her own death to protect her son, and that the head found in the crash belonged to some poor friend. While they try to patch things up, Monroe and Rosalie arrive. Kelly, being an old-school Grimm, goes after Monroe with a knife. Nick has to hold his mom back and explain that these days, not every monster is the enemy. It's that awkward dinner party, but with lethal weapons. Rosalie warns that Juliet is suffering from a nasty spell that erases memory, and they have only a few hours to brew a cure. While the alchemy team works, Nick and his mom go after Kimura in jail, but they're too late. Someone served the villain a poisoned sandwich. With no answers, they focus on the monster from the ship. The FBI gets involved, but as always in horror movies, they don't stand a chance. The monster lures the agents to a warehouse and does the dirty work. Nick arrives at the scene with his mom, like an action movie cop duo. Monroe calls warning that the cure is ready, but the clock is ticking. Nick is trapped in the warehouse, surrounded by corpses, and when he turns his back, the Mauvais Dentist appears roaring, ready for the final round. It's going down in the warehouse. The Mauvais Dentist goes after Nick with the subtlety of a bulldozer. Luckily, Kelly didn't come to play. While Nick tries to survive, his mother emerges from the shadows and, in a ninja assassin move, plunges a knife into the monster's neck. Game over for Tony the Tiger. Nick rushes to the hospital, leaving his gun and ammo behind. A rookie mistake the FBI won't overlook. He arrives at the last second and puts the cure drops in Juliet's eyes, but she keeps sleeping like Sleeping Beauty. While Nick deals with the suspicious police, his mom decides to tie up loose ends. She goes after Catherine, Adeline's mother, and, after exchanging pleasantries, sends the witch to hell. Before dying, Catherine drops the golden nugget. Only a prince of pure heart can wake Juliet. And who is the prince? Captain Renard. Yep, Catherine had brewed a potion that purifies the heart, but the process is painful as hell. Renard takes the stuff, contorts, emits black smoke, and becomes the hero for a day. Kelly says goodbye to her son, steals a car, and heads off to live the outlaw vigilante life. At the hospital, Renard enters, kisses Juliet, and sneaks out. She wakes up. Nick arrives all happy, thinking the nightmare is over. He kisses his girlfriend, full of hope, and she drops the line that hurts more than a punch to the face. Who are you? The guy saved the world, but lost the girl. Things start off tense with Gerald, an acquaintance of Hank's, asking for desperate help because his daughter, Carly, has gone missing. Nick, with his supernatural X-ray vision, immediately spots that Gerald is a coyote-type Vesson, but Hank remains oblivious, just wanting to help his friend. While Nick discovers the girl might be the victim of a bizarre ritual called Racion, Hank is doing old-school detective work, but clearly realizing there's something fishy going on. The investigation leads the dynamic duo to a suspicious farm. Nick finds Carly stuffed in a well, total horror movie vibe, but when they try to flee, the girl panics and transforms right in front of Hank. Nick's partner draws his gun, thinking it's a monster, but Nick intervenes. It's the moment of truth. Nick finally comes clean and admits he sees these creatures all the time. Instead of freaking out, Hank feels a massive relief. The guy thought he was going crazy, but now he finds out the world is the crazy one. With the partnership now 100% honest, they set a trap for the farm villain. A brawl ensues. Nick and Hank beat down the evil coyotes and save the day. Back at the station, there's a camaraderie moment where Hank accepts that Gerald is a human coyote just fine. But not everything is rosy. Juliet returns home from the hospital, but her memory of Nick is still zero. The atmosphere at home is colder than an ex's heart, and Nick is going to be sleeping on the couch. Sometime later, what was supposed to be a car accident turns into a zombie movie. The driver is covered in a disgusting infection and attacks a ranger, Ryan, who ends up becoming a carrier of the plague. Nick and Hank investigate the blood-filled crime scene and discover it's not the common flu, it's the yellow plague, a deadly thing for Vesson. Captain Renard gets savvy immediately, knowing there's an assassin named Nuclear V in town after Nick's key. Meanwhile, Juliet is trying to force her memory to return. She talks to Monroe and even Bud, that nice beaver guy, who accidentally drops the bomb that Nick is a Grimm. He tries to fix it by saying Grimm is slang for a good cop, but Juliet is more clueless than a needle in a haystack. The highlight happens when Monroe and Rosalie decide to have a romantic picnic. We even get the couple's first kiss, but the joy is short-lived because the infected Ryan shows up to ruin the date. Rosalie catches the disease instantly and starts hallucinating. Nick has to race against time, hunting Ryan down to use his blood for the cure. Monroe, under total pressure, becomes an improvised chemist, while Rosalie turns into an uncontrolled beast and tries to attack Nick with scissors. In the end, they manage to cure everyone, but the suspense remains. The Nuclear V monster is watching Rosalie's shop, just waiting for the moment to strike. An accountant is thrown into a wood chipper in a scene worthy of Fargo. Nick and Hank investigate and stumble upon a church where the metaphor is taken literally. The congregation consists of sheep and the pastor, Calvin, is a wolf. Yes, a wolf tending the flock. Calvin swears he's a reformed wolf, like a forced vegan, but his bank account in the Bahamas tells a different story. To unmask the scammer pastor, Nick sends in the best undercover agent possible, Monroe. It's literally throwing a wolf among the sheep. Monroe is tense, but discovers the pastor is having an affair with the church secretary, and they are embezzling the faithful's money. Meanwhile, the Nuclear V invades Nick's house looking for the mysterious key. Later, the beast tries to ambush Nick in the weapons trailer, but our protagonist steps up and sends the monster to the great beyond with a medieval warhammer. Back at the church, Pastor Calvin's plan goes horribly wrong. The truth about the theft and murders leaks, and the gentle sheep activate angry mob mode. They surround the pastor and tear him apart without mercy. Monroe almost gets caught in the crossfire, needing to wall to scare the crowd until the police arrive. In the end, the pastor died, but his accomplices escaped and are seen living the good life on a beach in the Caribbean. Does crime pay? Apparently for them it did. And because not everything is sunshine and rainbows, we see Nick trying to have a sweet moment with Juliet, but she's brutally honest. She only made his favorite dish because she read it in a notebook. Her memory is still gone. Meanwhile, Angelina doesn't waste any time. She heads to a bar, a guy starts hassling her, and she lashes out at him in response. Turns out she didn't kill just for sport. The guy had been hired to kill someone, and now his bosses are forcing Angelina to finish the job if she doesn't want to die. The target? None other than Monroe himself. The ex crashes Monroe's dinner, scares off Rosalie, and drops the bomb. She was hired to kill him. Monroe panics and calls Nick. Imagine in the scene: the Grimm, the Assassin X, and Monroe trying to hatch a plan. Angelina reveals the hit order came because Monroe has been helping a Grimm. In other words, it's Nick's fault. The plan is straight out of a spy movie. They use a potion from Rosalie to make Monroe suffer a temporary death and fool the villains. Everything seems to work until it's time to wake the dead guy up. Angelina plants a kiss on him. The bad guys realize it's a setup, and the shootout begins. Amidst the confusion, Angelina sacrifices herself to save Monroe and dies in his arms. The Grimm and the werewolf finish off the bad guys, but the mood is heavy. Monroe buries his ex in the forest and lets out a heartbreaking howl. Nick has a perfect dream where Juliet regains her memory, but since good things don't last, he wakes up to find nothing has changed. Meanwhile, a father and a young daughter are on a super suspicious road trip. The dad is nervous, cards are blocked, and wherever they go, dead people turn up. The police think the guy is a psychopath kidnapping his daughter, and everything indicates he's building a bunker in the woods. In the potion world, Monroe has been watching Rosalie's shop and doing everything wrong. He serves a customer with an earache and accidentally gives him the wrong mix, turning the guy into a chainsaw-wielding maniac destroying his own house. Monroe has to go over there and fix the mess in true supernatural customer service style. Back to the main case, the girl's mother is found injured and reveals the truth. The father isn't the villain. The girl, April, is a Drengzorn Vesson who hit puberty too early and turns into an uncontrollable monster when she gets angry. The dad was just trying to protect her and the world. With her mother hospitalized and her father imprisoned for kidnapping and no longer having any legal guardians, April is placed in a foster home. There, while playing, April becomes irritated over an argument about a swing and attacks her foster father. Nick arrives with a juvenile officer who is a hardliner, literally a lioness, to restrain the beast.
You think you can handle her?
In the end, Nick goes home thinking he'll get some peace, but Juliet, upon kissing him, sees Captain Renard's face. We have an academic decathlon, that place full of smart kids and helicopter moms. Pierce is the prodigy of the moment. Meanwhile, Renard is on a bizarre stalker level with Juliet. He takes advantage of Nick being busy investigating a homicide to give her a ride, and even breaks into her house while she's in the shower. The guy is totally out of control, punching people in the street and almost transforming in public. The case of the week involves Pierce's rivals in the decathlon being brutally murdered by a Loan, a type of lion. Nick and Hank suspect the stressed-out coach, but he ends up dead too. The investigation leads to Pierce's mother. They discover that she, in an insane attempt to create the perfect son, genetically altered the boy. The result? Pierce has an aggressive second self that eliminates the competition without him even knowing. The boy discovers he is the killer and, in a moment of despair, climbs a building to jump. Nick arrives in time and we get that tense moment of the hero saving the involuntary villain. Pierce goes to jail, but at least his beast side comes in handy to defend himself from bullies inside. In the end, Renard realizes his obsession with Juliet is destroying him and goes to ask Monroe for help at the spice shop. He needs a cure for obsessive behavior. It all unfolds in a tense atmosphere when Luis tries to play the hero. He sees a woman crying by the river and, thinking the worst is about to happen, dives in to save her. But in a macabre magic trick, the woman vanishes from the water and reappears on the bank, taking his son, Raphael, away. The guy is left screaming in vain, living every parent's worst nightmare. Meanwhile, Monroe is living his best life. He decorated the house for Halloween like a pro, scaring even Nick. He explains that for Vesson, Halloween is serious business, like a national holiday where they could terrorize villagers in the past. But the festive mood ends when Nick is called to the kidnapping case. Enter Detective Valentina, who seems to know too much about the case. She reveals they are dealing with La Llorona, an urban legend who kidnaps 3 children in different cities to drown them. It gets personal when they discover she isn't a normal Vesson, but something supernatural that has tormented Grimms for centuries. Things heat up when La Llorona takes the 3rd child. Nick, Hank, and Valentina rush to the river, and the detective tries to fight the entity, but punching a ghost is complicated. She turns into mist, shifts into a demonic form, and almost drowns Nick. In the end, she vanishes, but the children are saved. To close with a flourish, Monroe teaches a lesson to some bullies who smashed his window. He shows his true monster face, drops a trick or treat, and ensures no one will ever mess with his house again. Nick is having nightmares about a missing girl case, and the stress is spilling over onto Juliet. Meanwhile, a guy named Zane is burning photo evidence in a fireplace. Nick arrives applying pressure. The guy walks into a shock hall and tries to flee, but gets a beatdown and is released due to lack of evidence. That classic justice system loophole. But someone disagrees with this impunity. Zane is found dead, hung up, and tortured, with a mysterious symbol branded on his body. body. Monroe recognizes the mark and freezes. It's the symbol of the Endesishin, an extremist faction of Grimms who show no mercy. Bud, the friendly beaver, is terrified, thinking Nick has turned into a psycho. The twist happens with Ryan, an intern at the station who seemed harmless. The kid is obsessed with Nick, has his room wallpapered with photos of the detective, and decided to do the dirty work he thinks Nick doesn't have the guts to do. Ryan kidnaps Bud to clean up the city. When Nick arrives to save the day, he discovers the ultimate irony. Ryan, who hates Vesim, is actually a Lebensauger, a leech monster who is disgusted by his own nature. Nick arrests the lunatic and saves his friend. Meanwhile, in the world of complicated relationships, Renard returns Juliet's glasses, and they share that forbidden kiss we knew was going to cause trouble. Juliet slams the door in his face, horrified by what she just did. We go back in time, 7 years ago. Hank, still a uniformed officer, arrests Craig, a hysterical guy swearing that monsters killed 2 brothers in a house and tried to eat him. Back then, Hank thought the guy was crazy. Today, knowing Vesson exists, his conscience weighs a ton, especially because Craig is scheduled for execution the next day. Nick decides to help his partner review the case. They discover that the supposed victim, John Kresge, is actually a Wendigo, basically the Hannibal Lecter of the Vesson world, who loves keeping human remains in the basement. It's a race against the clock worthy of an action movie. While they hunt the monster, politics run wild with the mayoral candidate using the execution as a platform. The duo finds Kresge's new house and, surprise, there's a pit full of bones down there. Nick ends up trapped in the hole while Hank has to face the cannibal alone. A tense brawl ensues, but Hank gets his redemption, dispatches the monster, and calls in time to save Craig from lethal injection, but the episode saves the most awkward moment for last. Renard takes Juliet to the spice shop, supposedly to ask for medical help for their problem. Monroe, always helpful, goes to fetch ingredients, and when he comes back, he runs right into the captain and his best friend's girlfriend making out in a movie-worthy kiss. The awkwardness is successfully installed. The atmosphere gets so heavy that Juliet flees. And Monroe, with no other choice, tells Nick everything. Our Grimm goes to demand answers, and Juliet, at the peak of the mental confusion caused by the spell, admits she has feelings for another guy, but swears nothing has happened yet. Nick, hurt, packs his bags and goes to stay with Monroe. As if the relationship crisis wasn't enough, Adelind, the blonde troublemaker, is back. She tries to talk to Hank, who is immediately brutally beaten by 2 Hoonjagers. Nick's partner ends up in the hospital all broken up. Adelind, playing 4D chess, meets with Renard and gives an ultimatum. Either he hands over the mysterious key in 48 hours, or she tells Nick who the captain really is. To protect herself, she sets up a scheme to get arrested, thinking jail is the safest place against the captain. Nick finds out where Adelind's henchmen are and, together with Monroe, resorts to violence. A straight-up brawl breaks out at the hotel, and they dispatch the Hoonjagers. In the end, at the new crash pad, Monroe's house, the Blutbud drops the bomb. He recognizes the guy Juliet kissed from a TV interview. It's Renard. Nick discovers that the home record is his own boss. And to make matters worse, Renard finally finds Nick's secret trailer. The shit has hit the fan. Monroe tries to calm Nick down, but the phone rings. Time to investigate the bodies of the Vesson they dispatched in the previous episode. Meanwhile, Renard breaks into Nick's trailer with a key, but doesn't find the key he's looking for. The romantic drama turns into total chaos. Renard goes to Juliet's house, and the two can't control themselves. Nick, stealthy as a ninja, sees everything through the window. Instead of causing a scene, he goes back to Monroe's house, boiling with rage. Later, Renard tries to fix things with Adelind at an isolated lake. The talk heats up, he reveals his Vesson form to her, and the two, well, let's say an intense reconciliation happens. Rosalie returns from her trip to save the day. She, Nick, and Monroe discover that to break the love spell between Juliet and Renard, they need the cat that caused the infection. The problem? The cat became roadkill a long time ago. Monroe sums up the situation well. We're screwed, man. The climax happens when Nick and Renard agree to meet at an isolated cabin. The civilized chat doesn't last long and turns into a fistfight. Renard finally shows his true face to Nick, but swears he is on his side and wants to save Juliet. They make a forced truce. At the spice shop, Nick drinks a sinister potion to start breaking the spell. The stuff is so strong he falls to the floor, agonizing and turning red like a chili pepper. And over in Vienna, in a real-life post-credit scene, Adelind smiles upon discovering her pregnancy test is positive. Trouble is coming. Nick survives the the bizarre side effect of the potion and returns to his normal color. Now it's Juliet and Renard's turn to drink the remedy. Juliet goes home, but the stuff hits wrong. She starts having a heavy hallucination where a gigantic, bottomless hole takes up almost her entire living room. Meanwhile, a bank robbery happens in Portland, but it's not a money heist-style robbery. The bandits use their true monster faces, WOG, instead of masks. This makes Monroe furious because it breaks rule number 1, the Vesson Code of Honor. Never reveal yourselves to normal humans. If the secret gets out, it'll be a witch hunt. Nick and Hank try to investigate, but without physical evidence, it's hard to arrest the monsters legally. The Vesson community panics and demands a quick solution. Rosalie, seeing things are looking bad, decides to activate the Vesson Council, which is like the supernatural mafia that handles things when the police can't. Juliet continues on her bad trip, staring at the abyss in her living room. The phone rings from inside the hole and she, brave or crazy, walks over the void to answer. It's Nick, but the hallucination won't stop. The ending is brutal. When the police finally arrest the monster robbers and take them to the station, thinking the case is closed, a professional assassin in a suit appears out of nowhere and takes out the bandits right there in front of everyone. The Vesson Council doesn't play around. Break the rules. It's curtains. And Juliet, she hears a sinister voice coming out of the hole saying it wants to reveal the truth. Chilling. We meet Andre, a guy who attends grief support groups, but he's not there to whine about his problems. He's there to feed. The psycho transforms into a giant fly-type Vesson and sucks the tears from his victims, leaving behind parasites that blind the person. It's next level disgusting. Meanwhile, Monroe and Rosalie explain that Captain Renard is technically a Zauberbeast, which explains a lot. Nick and Hank investigate the blinded bodies and connect everything to a species of African fly that shouldn't be in Portland. Adeline, over in Vienna, keeps plotting and discovers the baby she's expecting has royal blood and is worth a fortune. Back to the main conflict, Andre attacks again, blinding his victims and leaving worms in their eyes. The hunt heats up, and Nick corners Andre in a building, but it all goes wrong. Before being arrested, the Vesson blows the parasite straight into Nick's eyes. Now our protagonist is blind and fumbling in the dark. The cure? Rosalie discovers they need to the monster's eye out while he's still alive and transformed. Nothing complex, right? Nick, even without seeing anything, develops absurd super hearing. Casey, the sister of one of the victims, is attacked, but the team arrives in time. Nick beats the hell out of the monster, guided only by sound, and Monroe does the dirty work. Casey finishes the villain off with a knife. In the end, Nick regains his sight and even comes out ahead with bionic hearing. We're at the launch party for Black Forest 2, a massive hit game. Everything looks like a celebration until Brody and Jenna head to a back room to hook up, but someone is watching, and they have acid-dripping fingernails. Brody ends up sliced in half, Mortal Kombat fatality style. The killer leaves a message written in blood, "Play my game." Nick and Hank discover that the game's dev team is rife with rivalries. The killer, using the handle Nameless, starts hunting down the developers. Meanwhile, at home, Juliet is having some glitches in the Matrix, seeing ghosts of Nick everywhere. She's regaining her memory, but in the creepiest way possible. The investigation leads to an IT guy named Trinket Lipslums. It's a classic story. He helped Jenna with the code, fell in love, got hit with a brutal rejection, and is now killing everyone out of revenge. The peak of the toxic nice guy. He kills another developer and leaves Sudoku riddles at the crime scenes. Nick solves the puzzles and figures out the next target. Jenna is taken to a safe house, but Trinket breaks in using his acid claws to cut through the glass. The guy has snapped. The police arrive, leading to a chase up to the roof. Trapped and surrounded by Nick and Hank, the villain decides to choose game over and jumps to his death. Meanwhile, Renard disposes of a bomb in a cafe, and Juliet demands Monroe take her to Aunt Marie's trailer to try and unlock her mind for good. In a flashback of an abusive husband throwing his wife off a balcony, cut to the present, and that same guy is being defended by Barry, a smooth-talking lawyer. Barry's secret? He eats toads in the courthouse bathroom to release pheromones that hypnotize the jury. Yes, the guy wogs into a Zegavolk and manipulates everyone, including poor Rosalie, who is on the jury, and starts believing the killer is innocent. Monroe keeps his promise and takes Juliet to the trailer. She recognizes the place, touches the medieval weapons and potions, but starts having a psychedelic breakdown, seeing multiple transparent Nicks talking at once. It's information overload, and she flees in terror. To save the court case, the team needs to neutralize the lawyer's power. The plan is worthy of a heist movie. Monroe sneaks into the guy's office to inject a potion into one of his toads. Chaos reigns. Toads escape. Monroe panics, thinking he injected the wrong one, but the plan proceeds. At the verdict, the magic happens. Rosalie and the jury convict the killer. Barry, desperate because his pheromones failed, goes to the spice shop to confront them and attacks Rosalie. Bad idea. He gets a beatdown from Monroe, gets arrested, and ends up in the same cell as the furious client he promised to set free. The ending is poetic. Jill makes the classic horror movie mistake, messing with things she shouldn't. She plays geologist on Mount Hood, steals some volcanic rocks, and naturally gets attacked by Marcus, a bull-like Vesson trying to warn her she's screwing up. But the real problem comes later. A magma creature called Vulcanalis invades her house, melts everything, and turns the girl into barbecue in the dining room. Meanwhile, Juliet is in a Fight Club vibe, having hallucinations of Nick everywhere at once. Her magical therapist gives her a reality check. Either she faces these memories and becomes part of them, or she has no future. Over in Vienna, Adalind is negotiating her royal baby with some sinister travelers who use a giant needle to test the child's blood. It's pure nightmare fuel. Nick discovers that Vulcanalis is basically a Roman fire priest with a terrible temper who hunts anyone who steals rocks from the volcano. Jill's boss, Tom, also swipes some souvenirs and almost turns into charcoal, but Nick arrives in time. The only issue is that bullets don't work on someone made of lava. The solution? Basic science and brute force. The team joins forces with Marcus, who wanted to avenge his wife, killed by the monster, and sets a trap in a warehouse. They use liquid nitrogen to cool off the hothead, Terminator 2 style, and Marcus finishes the job by sledgehammering the petrified villain into gravel. In the end, Juliet finally starts accepting the memories, and romance is back in the air. It looks like we changed channels and landed on the X-Files. On a farm, cows are being attacked, and a farmer is pushed to his death by a glowing blue alien. Nick and Wu investigate and run into a nutjob named George, who swears he's a UFO expert and keeps rambling about aliens. But we know in this universe, it's not E.T., it's Vesson. We discover the aliens are Gluenvolk, super rare bioluminescent creatures worth a fortune on the black market. Vincent and his pregnant wife Jocelyn are on the run because everyone wants their skin, literally, to make coats. That guy George isn't a ufologist at all. He's a ruthless, greedy poacher tracking the glowing family. Nick, Monroe, and Rosalie go into environmental protection mode. They raid the hunter's trailer and see the guy is a professional-level psychopath, complete with skinning knives. Now it's a race to find the couple before George forces a delivery through violence. The team finds Jocelyn in a cabin just as the baby is coming. Rosalie becomes an emergency midwife while all hell breaks loose outside. George invades the place armed with special rounds to preserve the victim's skin, but Monroe doesn't play nice and throws the villain through a wall. Nick finishes the job with the hunter's own weapon. The Gluenvolk flee to Alaska with their newborn, giving the Northern Lights a whole new meaning. Hank returns from vacation on crutches. Terrible timing because a writer was just killed in a bookstore. The center of the chaos is Chloe, a woman who seems to be a magnet for disaster. She's a Musai, a creature like an inspiring muse, but the hardcore version.
What might happen if you stay?
She kisses guys, inspires creativity, but leaves them so obsessed they end up as killers or lunatics. The problem is, Chloe plants a little kiss on Nick's hand, and he goes full junkie. The protagonist starts drawing compulsively, treats Monroe like trash, and completely ignores Juliet, even at a dinner he was invited to. He becomes addicted to her. Meanwhile, an ex-boyfriend painter, Anton, is painting the town red with rage and jealousy. Rosalie and Monroe discover the only cure for this lip service drug is good old true love. Cliché? Maybe, but necessary. Nick reaches the insane point of storming the precinct, ready to put a bullet in his rival Anton just to be with Chloe. Things are getting ugly and tense. In the climax, Juliet steps in front of Nick's gun and delivers that "look at me, I'm right here" speech. The spell breaks, and Nick comes back to his senses. Captain Renard, who has zero patience for messy muses, releases Chloe on the condition she never returns. And to ensure she gets the message, he gives her a monster wogue right in her face. Nobody messes with his detectives. Things start heating up here with Eric and Adalind almost getting down to business until his father, the king, calls to kill the mood. It's serious talk. Eric needs to rush to Portland to meet a certain Baron Samdi. Meanwhile, Nick and Juliet are in a 51st dates phase, trying to rekindle their romance with a repeat dinner date since she's regaining her memory. But peace is short-lived because Portland has turned into a horror movie set. A guy named Mopus, who was wogged into a coyote, is killed by police, but the weird part is he already had a death certificate from 3 days ago. And there's more. He was secreting a gross green goo. Nick starts seeing a mysterious man in a top hat lurking at crime scenes, like a classic classic Disney villain, only way more macabre. In Vienna, Adeline is desperate to get her powers back and makes a pact with Stefania, which involves trading a healthy baby for magic. It's the kind of contract you know will go wrong, but she signs it anyway. Back at the spice shop, it's the moment of truth. Rosalie and Monroe decide to show their Vesson forms to Juliet. It's a reality check, but she actually handles it well, proving she's ready to enter this crazy world. This Baron Samedi isn't playing around. He uses toxic spit to put people into a living death trance and starts assembling a zombie army inside shipping containers. The guy kidnaps Lily from the hospital and spits on everyone on a bus. The episode closes with Eric arriving in Portland and hugging the Baron like old friends, while Nick, clueless, enjoys dinner with his girlfriend. The circus is in town, and the clowns are zombies. Chaos is unleashed, and Eric wants to watch the world burn. He asks Baron Samedi for a demonstration of his poison on a bodyguard, and the result is terrifying. One spit in the face, and the guy drops stone cold. Eric loves it and drops the cliché villain line, "Let the games begin." Meanwhile, Nick and Juliet are having a cute moment, with her accepting all the Vesson madness, but reality soon kicks down the door. Portland officially becomes a branch of The Walking Dead. Rabid zombies are attacking civilians everywhere. Nick and Wu jump into action, facing people who should be dead but are very alive and hungry for a fight. They manage to capture a guy named Al and take him to the spice shop, where Rosalie prepares a cure and administers it with a needle that makes Pulp Fiction look like child's play. Over in Europe, Adeline's plot takes on Game of Thrones contours. Frau Petsch tries to pull a con using a potion to impersonate Adeline but falls into a brutal trap. Stefania and the real Adeline turn the tables, and the scene ends with Stefania ripping out Frau Petsch's heart. Heavy stuff. Back in the action, Nick discovers the container scheme at the docks. He goes for a direct confrontation with Baron Samedi, a sword vs. cane fight on top of the containers. Nick fights well, but ends up taking the fatal spit to the face. While Monroe, Rosalie, and Juliet are surrounded by a zombie horde in the car, Nick falls into a coffin prepared especially for him. Eric closes the lid with a "Good night, sweet Grimm." The hero has been boxed up. The situation is critical. Monroe channels his inner Fast and Furious getaway driver, trying to get the gang out of the zombie horde at the docks, running over everything and almost dropping into a pit. While they fight for their lives on top of a container, Renard discovers his brother Eric has shipped Nick in a coffin straight to the airport. It's a race against time. They find out there's a gas cure for the zombies and manage to save the people at the docks, but the focus is the Grimm. They rush to the airport, but they're too late. The plane with Nick and Baron Samedi has already taken off for Europe. It looks like the villain won, but nobody counted on the cunning, or rather the fury, of our protagonist. Inside the plane, Nick wakes up from the trance, but he doesn't come back normal. He's in Hulk smash mode. He breaks out of the coffin, goes after the Baron, and turns the flight into a Con Air remake. The brawl is so intense the plane crashes into a forest. The Baron dies in the crash, but Nick walks away from the wreckage, completely hallucinating and violent, while Adeline continues her macabre rituals in Austria, burying pieces of Frau Petsch to regain her powers. Nick arrives at a roadside bar. The guy is so out of it he beats up every patron and trashes the whole place. When his friends arrive to help, he's already vanished into the woods, leaving a trail of destruction. The season opener closes with Nick, now an uncontrollable beast, staring down an innocent family in the forest. The hero has become the monster. Hank and Monroe are on a mission impossible, tracking down Nick, who is zombified and loose in the woods. The problem is the scent of nature is messing with Monroe's nose. Meanwhile, Captain Renard and the ladies are coming with the cure, but the situation is critical. Nick, in true horror movie style, breaks into a random family's house. The dad tries to play hero, grabs a gun, but Nick is in full berserk mode. He smashes through doors, takes hits to the head, and even catches objects in midair without looking, like an undead ninja. The chase leads to a barn. The team tries to restrain Nick, but he has superhuman strength. It's a total brawl. Monroe and Hank get beaten up, Renard joins the fray, and even Juliet takes a slap to the face before she manages to jam the giant needle with the antidote into his stomach. It's complete chaos until the Grimm finally passes out. Meanwhile, back in Austria, Adeline is performing a bizarre ritual with Stefania. Back in Portland, Nick wakes up in pain and with no memory. The gang has to explain he turned into the Hulk and broke everything. The bigger problem? One of the guys he assaulted at the bar died. Now, Renard sets up a cover cover-up scheme worthy of How to Get Away with Murder to clear Nick's name. Oh, and the captain finds out his brother Eric blew up in a car bomb in Vienna. In the end, Nick is home, but his skin color is gray and his body temperature is corpse-like, giving Juliet a scare. Looks like the zombie effect hasn't 100% worn off. The episode kicks off with Nick getting a physical exam and confusing the doctor. The guy's heart is calmer than a Tibetan monk, no matter the exertion. Must be a zombie side effect. Meanwhile, Monroe and Rosalie are in that cute couple phase, deciding to move in together until the vibe cuts to an alien movie. A guy climbs a tree and his stomach explodes. Nick and Hank investigate and discover the victims, who are exploding all over the place, have two things in common. They are Blutbaden, wolves, and they ate at the fancy restaurant Raven and Rose. The ironic twist, the head chef Osler is a Bauerschwein, meaning it's the three little pigs' revenge against the big bad wolf, using toxic mushrooms in the food. Monroe gets pissed when a friend of his dies this way and decides to exact justice with his own claws. The climax happens in a dark alley. Monroe is ready to dine on Chef Osler, surrounded by other furious wolves. Nick shows up to stop his friend from becoming a murderer, and they stage a performance worthy of an Oscar. Nick shoots Monroe and pretends he killed his partner to terrify Chef Osler. The pig, scared to death, confesses to the crimes to get away from the wolves. Monroe revives all smiles. In the end, Osler goes to jail and Renard drops the joke of the century. This little piggy went to the pen. We have a group of kids partying by the river, very suspense movie cliche. The mood heats up between Jake and Sarah, but soon turns into a nightmare when their friend Dan is pulled underwater and dies. Jake almost bites the dust too, but is saved by a mysterious figure who breathes underwater. Nick and Hank step in and discover Jake was saved by Ellie, a deaf girl who is actually a naiad. The family drama is heavy. The girl's father tries to take the blame for the murder to protect his daughters, but the truth is two naiad boys, Dominic and Jesse, killed Dan because he was getting involved with one of their kind. Pure aquatic prejudice. They kidnap poor Ellie to perform a barbaric banishment ritual, cutting the membranes of her webbed fingers. Nick and Hank arrive in time to stop the torture. While Hank handles one of the villains on the dock, Nick dives in to save Ellie, who was thrown to the riverbed tied to an anchor. And here we see another perk of zombie mode. Nick stays underwater for ages without breathing and comes out pale, but very much alive. The case is solved, the villains are arrested, and Jake is bummed to realize the girl who saved him isn't human. Nick closes with the perfect line for the city: nobody is normal in Portland. 2 weeks ago, a gas station attendant named Andres gets beaten worse than an action movie villain during a robbery. At the hospital, his mother unleashes a curse only a mother can. The guilty will pay. Cut to a motel room where a creature is watching it all on TV and shredding the armchair in pure rage. Meanwhile, Nick finds out his mom is emailing from Slovenia. Yeah, Kelly is alive. And Juliet finally discovers her mother-in-law is a Grimm too. In Vienna, Adeline gets an ultrasound and the doctor hears 2 heartbeats. Relax. It's not twins, just mystical weirdness. Back in Portland, the thugs who beat Andre start getting hunted. Nick and Hank think the culprit is dog-related and go after Ray Bolton, a guy who organizes dogfights and is pure toxic trash. Bolton tries to fight, but Nick arrests him easily. But the plot twist hits hard. With Ray in jail, another attack happens. The community talks about El Cucuy, the Latino boogeyman who answers the call of suffering women. When Ray is released and beats up a war veteran, divine justice shows up. At the villain's house, Nick and Hank arrive too late and find Ray shredded. The monster's true identity? Mistress Garcia. She wolves, kills who needs killing, and turns back into the sweet grandma. At the precinct, she plays dumb, and the police are forced to let her go since no one would believe the senior citizen is the predator. And off she goes, smiling to the next town to clean up the trash. The mood gets heavy in a church, complete with a classic exorcism. A boy named Daniel is tied up and the priest is praying, but the kid wakes up looking demonic, breaks the bonds, and throws the priest against the wall with full force. Game over for the clergyman. Nick and Hank arrive at the scene thinking it's a Vesson case, but Daniel doesn't actually transform. He just gets bizarre. Monroe and Rosalie float a theory. It seems to be a Grausen. According to legend, it's not Vesson. It's a possession that makes the Vesson Council send an assassin to delete the file, if you catch my drift. And the exterminator, Alexander, is already on the kid's tail. While Renard is in Vienna playing John Wick and dispatching assassins in the sewers, Juliet uses her veterinary knowledge and cracks the case. The boy isn't possessed. He's infected infected by a rare parasite he picked up in the Middle East. The cure is radical. Turn the kid into a popsicle. They need to lower his body temperature to kill the bug. A chase begins in the woods at night. Daniel runs away. Alexander tries to kill him, and Nick tries to save everyone. In a snow fort, the cold makes the parasites come out, disgusting, and die. Nick throws the medical report in Alexander's face, proving it was a disease, not a demon. The council accepts the science. Alexander leaves, and Nick notes in the book that sometimes hypothermia is the best medicine. In Vienna, Adeline meets the new head of the royal mob, Prince Victor. The guy wants revenge for Eric's death and already has her making a list of suspects. Over in Portland, we have a problem worthy of the Ninja Turtles. Someone is breaking into houses via the sewers and people's arms off like they're Lego figures. And it doesn't stop there. A maintenance worker becomes food for a crocodile? Close enough. Monroe explains the beast is a Galimchitis, an ancient species of gladiator crocodile. To face this mountain of muscle living in the tunnels, Nick goes to the trailer and digs up a vambrace, a medieval armband with a hidden blade. Nick and Hank go down into the sewer and find Gregoric, the monster of the week. The beast recognizes Nick immediately and calls him Decapitare, an affectionate Latin nickname for a Grimm. They arrest Gregoric, but his family isn't happy. Hank gets kidnapped by the monster's two brothers and taken back to the sewers. Nick is forced into a hostage exchange that turns into a free-for-all brawl. With the help of his new accessory, basically the hidden blade from Assassin's Creed, Nick slices up the villains and saves his partner. Meanwhile, Adeline rubs a magical jelly on her belly that turns into a spider and burrows into her skin, showing this pregnancy is going to be anything but normal. Nick ends the day putting the vambrace away and enjoying the new nickname, Decapitare. Christmas spirit is in the air, but two kids decide that instead of waiting for presents, it's better to steal someone's car. Terrible choice. They run into a Santa Claus who couldn't care less about ho 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 and go straight to violence with a whip and claws, stuffing one of them into a sack like garbage. Meanwhile, Monroe tries to decorate the house, but Rosalie is in a total anti-Christmas vibe because she lost her aunt around this time. Heavy atmosphere at the Wolf household. Nick and Hank investigate the disappearance and find coal at the crime scene. Not barbecue charcoal, but actual North Pole coal. Things get serious when they discover Santa is none other than Krampus. If you don't know him, imagine the boogeyman, only he hangs kids in trees to eat later. Monroe, Hank, and even Bud, who was terrified, head into the forest to hunt the monster before midnight. Nick finds Krampus, and an insane fight breaks out, with the Grimm getting choked until he goes Grey Hulk for a second. But as soon as the clock strikes midnight, the monster turns back into a normal guy, a photographer who doesn't even know what's happening. They decide not to arrest the guy since he doesn't even know he turns into a sadistic demon, and leave it to the Vesson Council to resolve. In the end, Monroe manages to convince Rosalie to enjoy a different kind of Christmas, with beer and cigars, keeping her aunt's tradition alive. Nick is running through the forest looking like the Flash, showing that the zombie side effects are still lingering. At home, Juliet welcomes her friend Alicia, who is fleeing an abusive husband named Joe. The problem is, the guy is on her tail. Meanwhile, in Vienna, Renard has a tense chat with pregnant Adeline, trying to figure out who the father is, but she plays hard to get. In Portland, there's some radioactive drama going on. A Russian healer named Boris is saving people, but he glows green like plutonium, and anyone who touches him ends up melting from the inside. An assassin tries to kill Boris and ends up as radioactive mush. Nick discovers Boris is a Koshie and is being hunted for revenge. Boris's maid, Larissa, poisons him because he killed her family in the past when he was a KGB assassin. Upon discovering the betrayal, Boris's wife lashes out, striking Larissa with a fatal blow. In a moment of redemption, Boris uses the rest of his life force to cure Larissa and dies in the process. Poetic and tragic. Alicia is still processing that her friend is dating a Grimm, but Juliet tries to act natural, which never works. Meanwhile, Jared, a good kid, witnesses a gang execution GTA style. The victim and the killers were Vesson. The problem is, Jared is the brother of Zuri, the physical therapist Hank is crushing on. Of course, the gang finds out there's a witness and the hunt for the kid begins. Hank enters full-time protector mode, taking Zuri and her brother to a hotel. But the kid makes the classic horror movie mistake. He answers the phone and gives away his location to his girlfriend, who had a gun to her head. The gang kidnaps Jared and things get ugly. Nick and Hank arrive at the hideout to save the day amidst a shootout. When the gang leader is about to finish off the boy, Zuri unleashes her inner beast beast, literally, and rips the bandit's throat out. Hank sees everything, discovers his crush is Vesson, and surprisingly says he doesn't care and wants to be with her. But then comes the sad plot twist. She says she cares and that it won't work. Hank gets a historic dumping right after saving her life. Soldier down. Meanwhile, Frankie, who clearly isn't doing well, invades Ron's personal space in a bar, shows some nasty scars on his arm, and throws a blood-stained napkin at him. The message is clear. She wants him to admit what he did. Ron tries to kick her out of his house later, but ends up getting the worst of it when a scorpion-style Vesson, a manticore, shows up and sends him to the afterlife with a venomous tail. While Nick and Hank try to decipher this murder without a firearm, Rosalie is living her own family drama. She goes to dinner with her mother and sister, Dieta, who is basically the definition of a toxic person. The tension is so high that Rosalie ends up exploding and revealing she missed her father's funeral because she was in jail. It's drama on top of drama. The investigation points to Frankie, but the story is much darker. We discover that she was a victim of a group of soldiers, and Colonel Desai, who is dying of cancer, decided to play vigilante to clear her honor. But the real villain is Jim, one of the soldiers who is trying to eliminate loose ends, killing even his colleagues to get away with it. The final confrontation is worthy of a monster movie. Jim and Desai transform and throw down. Desai takes the fall, but ensures justice is served, confessing everything before dying and leaving Jim cornered by the police. In the end, Frankie gets the closure she needed, and the villain goes to the slammer. In this episode, we have a maniac on the road who makes Toretto from Fast and Furious look like an amateur. Meanwhile, Monroe raises the bar on romance and proposes to Rosalie using a cuckoo clock. It's the cutest and weirdest thing you'll see today, and she accepts immediately. But the joy is short-lived because Monroe's parents decide to visit. They are traditionalists, meaning they hate the idea of a Blutbud marrying a Fuchsbau. Dinner turns into a complete disaster, with Rosalie storming out of the house furious. And to make matters worse, Nick decides to show up right then to ask for help with the scalper case. The problem is the killer is a Wildeshir, a monster that seeks worthy warriors to make a coat of human skin, like a psychopathic, jacked-up Cruella. And guess who's at the top of the worthy warriors list? Our Grimm, of course. The situation in Monroe's house goes from 0 to 100 real quick. His father smells the Grimm on Nick, and instinct takes over. The old folks walg and go after Nick, forcing Monroe to jump in the middle of the fight to stop his in-laws from killing his best friend. It's the worst Meet the Parents in history. The brawl in Monroe's living room is interrupted, but the damage is done. His parents leave fuming. Meanwhile, in Europe, Adeland is on the run with Meisner, and the baby she's carrying is getting scarier by the minute, using telekinesis to kill anyone who tries to stop their escape. Yeah, this kid is going to be trouble. In Portland, Nick and Monroe need to focus on the Wildeshir, who is terrorizing a campground. They discover in the old books that the monster's weak point is cutting its hair, Samson style from the Bible. Sounds ridiculous, but it's what we've got. Monroe tries to talk to his dad one last time, but the old man is stubborn and won't accept his friendship with a Grimm. The dynamic duo heads to the forest, armed to the teeth, but they get ambushed. Things get ugly. Monroe and Nick are taking a beating until Monroe's dad shows up. He couldn't stand seeing his son in danger and joins the fight. In a frenetic sequence, they manage to cut the monster's hair, and they drop dead on the spot. Monroe's dad finally understands that times have changed and accepts the alliance. The episode ends with another dinner, still kind of awkward, but now everyone is on the same side. Only Adeline gets no rest, going into labor in the middle of nowhere. She nearly rips Meisner's hand off and regains her Hexen Beast powers the moment the baby is born. It was so intense that objects were flying across the room. Meanwhile, in Portland, we have a real-life horror movie. Dana, a childhood friend of Woo's who is pregnant, becomes the target of a bizarre creature that looks like something straight out of a Japanese nightmare. The beast has a massive tongue that enters through the belly button to suck out amniotic fluid. It's next-level gross. Woo, being the dedicated cop he is, gets too involved. He starts having visions and dreams about the monster, the legendary Aswan, a story his grandmother used to tell. Nick and Hank discover that the victim's husband, Sam, is hiding something. The truth, the creature is Sam's mother. She is literally the world's most toxic mother-in-law, following a macabre tradition of eating her first grandchild to extend her own life. The atmosphere gets heavy when Woo sees the transformed creature attacking Dana. The poor guy goes into total shock. Nick arrives in time to dispatch Grandma Monster, but the damage is done. Woo saw what he wasn't supposed to, freaked out, and since nobody told him the truth, thanks a lot, Nick, the sergeant ends up checking himself into a psychiatric hospital thinking he's lost his mind. A pretty bad vibes ending for our favorite cop. While Wu draws monsters in therapy and tries to figure out if he's gone completely crazy, the plot turns into Indiana Jones. They discover an Egyptian sarcophagus at a university containing a mummy that is, in fact, a mummified vessel. This attracts the attention of some radical activists who think exposing the dead like this is disrespectful. The Vesen Council steps in and sends Alexander to handle the situation. The problem is that handling it for them means ordering Nick, our Grimm, to take out the radical activist who is killing people to protect the mummy. Basically, they want to use Nick as a hitman. In Europe, the escape saga continues. Adeline and the baby, with Meisner's help, narrowly escape the royal henchmen in the middle of the forest. Back in Portland, Nick decides not to play the council's game. Instead, the group build a funeral pyre and burn the mummy with respect in a somewhat mystical ceremony. In the end, Nick and Hank pick up Wu from the hospital. The sergeant decides to swallow the blue pill, pretending it was all a hallucination so he can go back to work. But we know that lid won't hold the pressure for long. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Freak Show. A carnival arrives in town with attractions that are actually Vesen being forced to walk on stage. It's like X-Men, but sad and exploitative. The ringmaster, Hedig, is that classic abusive boss who keeps everyone in line through fear. Some murders happen in town, and the blame seems to fall on Max, the show's Wolfman, who is suffering from something called Umkipen. When you transform so much, you lose control. Monroe and Rosalie, who were planning their wedding, decide to infiltrate the circus. Rosalie auditions to replace the bearded lady and joins the team. The plan nearly goes south when Monroe has to fight the out-of-control Max, but the truth comes out. The real villain and killer is the circus owner, who killed anyone who discovered the secret. Justice here is poetic and hot. The other freaks of the show corner the boss in a hall of mirrors, and the group's dragon turns the villain into barbecue. Nick and Hank arrive just to see the extra crispy result, and the episode closes with a little mood setter. Rosalie goes home in her circus costume, and Monroe, well, let's just say he enjoyed the role play. Nick has a big problem that doesn't involve decapitating monsters, being the best man at Monroe's wedding. The issue is that, being a Grimm, his presence is basically a Vesen guest repellent. The brilliant solution? Sunglasses. According to Monroe, this hides his death stare, which is exactly what sets Grimms apart from everyone else. They test it, and incredibly, it works. It's like Cyclops from the X-Men, but to avoid social awkwardness instead of destroying roofs. Meanwhile, in Europe, things are heating up. Adeline is on the run with the baby and Meisner facing off against Virat agents. Meisner fights well, but the scene stealer is Kelly. Yes, Mick's mom appears out of nowhere, silent assassin style, to save the day. They catch a plane fleeing to Brazil but decide to change course. On the flight, Adeline's baby starts showing signs of being abnormal. Victor, the royal villain, is furious about the escape and orders the elimination of the useless Danilov, promoting Rispoli. Kelly takes Adeline straight to Portland, to Nick and Juliet's house. The atmosphere gets incredibly heavy since Adeline did that magic that put Juliet in a coma before, but the priority is the mutant baby who is wrecking the house with telekinesis. Kelly warns that the child has a great destiny, but Adeline tries to pull a fast one and flee with her daughter. She steals a truck and heads straight to Captain Renard's apartment. There, she hands the child to him and drops the bomb. Say hi to Daddy. Adeline is hiding out in Renard's apartment, eating his food and barking orders. The captain holds his daughter for the first time, but the cute moment is short-lived. Nick shows up to negotiate a truce, warning that working together is their only chance of survival. Meanwhile, Weston, a corrupt FBI agent working for the Royals, is watching everything. Kelly, Nick's mom, notices the surveillance and solves the problem with brute force, knocking the guy out. Things get ugly when the Virat invades the building. A shootout ensues in the stairwell, but Team Nick, Renard, and Kelly clear the area. They decide to take everyone to Monroe and Rosalie's house, because nothing says friendship like bringing an international assassination target to your friend's house in the middle of the night. Baby Diana continues to show bizarre powers, levitating lockets and scaring everyone. Victor arrives in Portland demanding the child or he'll kill everyone. Renard pretends to accept the deal and sets a meeting at the airport. There, he hands the baby over to Victor and Adeline freaks out, thinking she's been betrayed. But, plot twist, as soon as Victor boards the jet, 5 masked figures, who are Nick and his crew disguised as the Resistance, intercept the transport and steal the child back. Adeline, unaware it's all a plan, has a total collapse in the middle of the street, shattering car windows with a sonic scream. In the end, Kelly takes an old truck and drives off with her superpowered granddaughter, who is already levitating toy keys. Grandma is going to have her hands full. Renard is drowning his sorrows at a bar when he almost gets shot by Weston but gets lucky and escapes. The city is in chaos. Adeline bangs on Nick's door in desperation, thinking her child is with the royals. Juliet, having no patience for the ex-villain, gives her a reality check, and Adeline leaves furious. On the road, two Vesson try to attack a random girl and discover, in the worst way possible, that they messed with the wrong person. Nick and Hank investigate the crime scene and are shocked. Someone killed two dangerous monsters single-handedly. Adeline corners Renard in the garage. A physical and magical fight ensues, but in the end, she just wants her daughter back. Victor, taking advantage of her desperation, lies over the phone saying he has the baby just to manipulate Adeline into doing what he wants. The investigation leads Nick to the mysterious girl, Trouble. She's stealing boots and picking fights with Vesson gangs. When Nick finally corners her, Monroe reveals the unthinkable. The girl is a Grimm, except she has no idea what that means. She thinks she's going crazy seeing monsters. Nick plays the mentor role, takes her to the magic trailer, and shows her the books, like Hogwarts for Grimms. Trouble is shocked to discover it's not a hallucination. While Adeline starts a dangerous game of false alliances with Renard and Victor, Nick decides to take Trouble home. Juliet's face when he arrives with a delinquent Grimm for dinner is priceless. Nick's life has turned into one of those sitcoms where you have to hide a crazy relative in the attic. The relative here is Trouble, the new Grimm who eats Chinese food with her hands and thinks every Vesson deserves to die. Nick tries to teach her that not every monster is a villain, taking her to meet Monroe and Rosalie. Her reaction to seeing them walk is priceless, like finding out Santa Claus exists, but he's a werewolf. While Nick plays Professor X, a criminal scheme worthy of a teen movie about mall robberies unfolds, but with blood-sucking vampires. The leader, Ken, uses pretty girls to steal designer clothes, and if they slip up, they become his dinner. When one of the girls turns up dead, Nick and Hank take the case. Trouble, with all the subtlety of a bulldozer, decides to infiltrate the gang. The problem? She has to walk in high heels and a fancy dress, which for her is harder than killing monsters. The mission almost goes wrong when Ken, the supernatural pimp, tries to hit on her. Trouble has no patience for harassment, beats the guy up, and reveals she's a Grimm. Chaos ensues in the warehouse, with Vesson flying and Trouble fighting everyone. Nick and Hank arrive cavalry style, but the girl settles it with a knife. In the end, she agrees to be trained, but keeps that look of someone who sleeps with a knife under their pillow. Meanwhile, Adeline tries to open a book she found, but it won't open, even when she hurls it against a mirror. When she tries to use a shard of glass to pry it open, she ends up cutting her hand. Blood from the wound splashes onto the book, causing it to open. Wedding vibes are in the air at Monroe and Rosalie's house, but the peace doesn't last long. Enter an old Grimm named Rolek and his son Josh, who thinks his dad is senile for seeing monsters. They are being hunted by a guy named Weston Stewart and his henchmen, who look like they stepped straight out of a bad spy movie. Rolek is on his last legs and desperately needs to pass his secrets to Nick. Trouble ends up serving as a bridge between them, proving she's useful for something other than eating bacon. She takes the old man to the hospital, but the situation gets complicated when the villains show up armed to the teeth, and Trouble shows she doesn't know when to stay put, jumping into the fight to help Nick. Unfortunately, old Rolek passes away, but not before leaving a clue to the location of one of the famous Grimm keys. The bizarre highlight of the episode goes to Adeline. She breaks into Nick's house, steals Juliet's clothes, and prepares a potion in true Harry Potter Polyjuice style. She inhales green smoke from a witch's hat, seriously, super cliche, and transforms into a perfect copy of Juliet. Renard, who isn't stupid, starts to suspect something is very wrong. Now, with Nick holding two of the keys to the Grimm treasure map and an imposter on the loose, chaos is guaranteed. It's wedding day, but the best man is the one who gets screwed, literally. Adeline, disguised as Juliet, manages to fool the protagonist and gets him into bed. The problem is that this wasn't just conjugal betrayal, it was a spell to strip him of his powers. Meanwhile, the real Juliet returns from the salon and finds the bed in disarray. The tension is instant, featuring a relationship talk in the car on the way to the ceremony. Renard finally connects the dots, discovers Adeline's fraud, and rushes to bring the antidote to Nick. But the captain has the world's worst timing and takes 3 bullets from the traitor Weston Stewart at Nick's front door. Trouble, who was home alone, turns into a teenage John Wick. She gets cornered in the bedroom but pulls out a giant machete and decapitates the villain with a single strike. The problem is, she has to run to the wedding with the antidote, leaving the headless body behind. At the wedding, the ceremony is beautiful, but the ending is tragic. Trouble arrives screaming and drops the vial of antidote in the confusion. The Vesson guests, happy with the union, show their true faces. The catch: Nick looks around and sees nothing, just normal people. Adeline's spell worked. The Grimm is no longer a Grimm. He stares at the transformed Monroe and only sees his human friend, realizing that now he's the only blind man in a land of monsters. What a lovely wedding gift, right? At the hospital, doctors are in an insane rush to operate on Captain Renard, who took more bullets than an 80s action movie villain. Meanwhile, Trouble, who is the MVP of the moment, explains to the team that the shooter was a Hoonjager and that she had to decapitate him in self-defense. Nick, always thinking fast, tells her to tell the police that the giant machete in the room is his. Just some crazy collector stuff. On the other side of town, we see a strange guy standing on the street having flashbacks. He enters a guy named Henry's house and suddenly wogs into a creature that looks like a disgusting humanoid octopus.
I don't have all the details. Some sort of severe head injury.
He shoves tentacles into the guy's head and steals his memories, leaving the victim with a fried brain. The police, including Sergeant Wu, arrive at Nick's house. Wu is super suspicious of the Grimm books in Trouble's room and the headless body on the floor, but Nick deflects, saying they are just family stories. The atmosphere gets tense when FBI agent Chavez shows up, searches Trouble's room, and secretly wogs into an eagle-like creature upon seeing the Grimm diary. She realizes the girl isn't normal. Back home, there's that depressing crime scene cleanup scene, with Nick and Juliet scrubbing blood off the floor and lamenting that Nick lost his powers because of Adeline. Lawrence, the octopus memory thief, continues cleaning out the city until Trouble, disguised as a mugger, tries to catch him and confirms he is a Gedachnis Esser. In the end, despite the medical efforts, Renard's heart stops and the doctor declares the captain dead. Right after Renard dies, a mysterious woman enters the room, freezes time Doctor Strange style, and uses a bizarre 2-headed snake to bring the captain back. It's his mother, and the ritual is pure heavy witchcraft. Meanwhile, Trouble turns pro-spy and follows Lawrence, the octopus head, to a hotel. The guy changes his look, dyes his hair, and moves on to the next victim. Over in Europe, Adeline is trapped in a dungeon in Victor's castle, hearing voices in the wall and freaking out with rats, believing she'll get her daughter back if she helps the resistance. In Portland, Agent Chavez tries to test Nick, woging in front of him to see his reaction, but since he has no powers, he doesn't even blink, leaving her confused. Things heat up when Lawrence breaks into another house and realizes Trouble is snooping. He knocks the girl out and decides to suck out her memories, but the spell backfires on the sorcerer. The memories of a Grimm's life are so traumatic and full of monsters that the creature goes into total panic, retracts his tentacles, and freezes in terror.
Oh God, you're a Grimm.
Nick and Hank arrive, arrest the guy, who is now traumatized forever, and save Trouble. Everything seems to be calming down until the next day when Nick and Adeline have an absurd synchronized headache. Out of nowhere, their vision connects via mystical Wi-Fi, and one starts seeing what the other sees. To top it off, Trouble goes out for a bike ride and gets kidnapped by a black van commanded by Chavez. Nick is worried about the visions of Adeline's imprisonment and goes to the doctor, who confirms he has extra cones in his eyes, meaning genetically, he is still a Grimm, just suffering from a bad connection. Meanwhile, Trouble wakes up in an abandoned warehouse with Chavez. The agent reveals herself to be a Shti Nedler, and instead of arresting the girl, basically tries to recruit her for a secret Vesson squad, like a supernatural shield. The case of the week involves a boxing gym where the fighting is too real. The owner, Stan, is a crooked Shinderdev who uses a bullfighter named Clay to make money, and anyone who demands extra payment ends up suicide. Nick sends Trouble to infiltrate the gym to investigate. She ends up in the ring against the demon horse Vesson and, fighting dirty, wins the match and the criminal owner's trust. Over in Austria, Adeline follows the instructions from the voice in the wall, eats a dubious magic brownie, and escapes the cell through a secret tunnel. In Portland, Renard's mother figures out how to reverse Adeline's spell, but warns she'll need to make a complicated potion. The climax happens in the gym's alley. The villain is strong and throws the detectives around, but Trouble jumps on his back and in a workplace accident, snaps the guy's neck. Clay's mother, a toxic manager on a maximum level, tries to force her son to kill Trouble, but the fighter finally finds the courage to injure his own arm and decides he's had enough of this violent life. Trouble saves the day again, but Nick's psychic connection with Adalind is getting stronger. Things are ugly at the spice shop, a brick flies through the window and threats from hate groups pour in, but Elizabeth doesn't care and remains focused on the potion for Nick. Meanwhile, we have some heavy drama going on with Sarah and her abusive ex, Keith. The guy is human garbage. He breaks into the house, beats her, and threatens everyone, but karma comes fast, and it's made of mud. Keith is literally swallowed by a puddle of living mud right after leaving the house. Nick and Hank arrive at the scene and quickly realize this wasn't a standard hit and run. Sarah's brother Ben, a rabbi, confesses he used an ancient scroll to summon a golem to protect the family. It's like Frankenstein, but the Jewish version, and made of clay. The problem is that this supernatural bodyguard doesn't have an off button and starts attacking anyone who threatens the boy David, including the deceased Keith's brother, who shows up wanting revenge. The only solution? Nick has to play the villain. He needs to threaten the boy David, pretending he's going to arrest the kid and acting aggressively, just so the golem appears to defend the child and falls into the trap. The plan is risky, and the golem beats everyone up, nearly swallowing Trouble in the process. In the end, it's David himself who has to show courage and order the monster to stop. Back at base, Elizabeth brings the bombshell news. There is a cure for Nick to return to being a Grimm, but the secret ingredient is Juliet. If you thought your relationship problems were bad, wait until you hear this. For Nick to regain his powers, Juliet needs to inhale a potion, turn into an identical copy of Adalind, yes, their mortal enemy, and go to bed with Nick. The level of awkwardness in the room breaks records, but Juliet, being the MVP of the season, accepts the sacrifice. Meanwhile, the real Adalind is trapped in a castle having bizarre hallucinations. In Portland, we have a case that is pure gaslighting juice. A wealthy woman named Ava is being tormented by a talking wolf who drinks whiskey and appears in her house. Everyone, including the doctors, thinks she's lost it, but Nick and Hank are suspicious, and rightly so. Her husband, Gabriel, is posing as a saint, but is actually setting everything up to get the inheritance. Monroe steps in to investigate undercover and discovers the scam. It's not just one husband, it's 4. Gabriel is a quadruplet, and the brothers use this to drive the poor woman crazy, appearing in different places at the same time. It's like a cheap magic trick, but cruel. The team dismantles the brothers' Scooby-Doo scheme and sends them all to jail. In the end, Nick decides he prefers the dangerous life of a Grimm to a normal life, and Juliet confirms. Time to drink the magic potion, become Adalind, and make it happen. The moment of truth has arrived. Juliet inhales the sinister potion, turns into Adalind's double, and, well, the couple does what they have to do for the magic to work. Is it weird? Very. But soon after, she turns back to normal, though no one knows if it worked right away. The victorious mood is short-lived because Monroe and Rosalie suffer a hate crime at their own home, with a symbol burned onto their lawn. The Purist Vesson organization isn't playing around, and the message has been sent. Meanwhile, Nick and Hank investigate kidnappings on a deserted highway. The vibe here is total horror movie with ancient rituals. They discover some Vesson called Fanzigars, who look like Komodo dragons, strangle victims with their tongues to sacrifice them in a junkyard pit every 3 years. They even grab Officer Ferris to complete the macabre ritual along with another hostage. During the rescue, Nick is suffering from insane headaches and nearly passes out amidst the scrap metal while the villains vogue. It looks like things have gone south and he's going to die, but it's actually his system rebooting. When the monster leader attacks, Nick's vision comes back full force. The Grimm is back, guys. He sees the transformation, rips the creature's tongue out with a legendary uppercut, and beats everyone down. Back at the precinct, everything seems fine until Nick gets home and runs into Josh holding a machete in the living room. The Christmas spirit in Portland feels different, and not because of the lights. A party is interrupted when a giant gift box arrives at the door, but instead of an ugly sweater, out pops a green, hairy creature that starts destroying everything. Basically, we have a real-life version of Gremlins. Meanwhile, Monroe and Rosalie, the show's cutest couple, are planning their delayed honeymoon. But the calm doesn't last long with these little monsters called Caliconseroy terrorizing terrorizing the city. Nick and Hank discover that these goblins are actually Vesson teenagers going through a bizarre puberty that only happens at Christmas. And the cure? Believe it or not, fruitcake. Seriously, that hard cake nobody likes is the only thing that turns them back to normal. Monroe and Rosalie use a food truck loaded with the sweet glop as bait, luring the mischievous kids into a trap. It works like a charm, and the boys return to human form before they destroy an entire church. Amidst this mess, we have emotional goodbyes. Trouble decides it's time to go her own way and takes Josh along, taking Aunt Marie's old car for a supernatural-style road trip. Renard deals with family drama and his dangerous mother, while Wu gets closer and closer to discovering the truth, analyzing drawings of monsters. And to close with some suspense, Juliet, alone at home, takes a pregnancy test looking like she's seen a ghost. A doctor returns from the Dominican Republic bringing back something worse than jet lag. He's been infected and turns into none other than the legendary Chupacabra. The guy starts attacking people in Portland, draining folks' blood. Sergeant Wu, who is already not thinking straight, sees the creature and is on the verge of a total collapse, thinking he's officially gone crazy.
What the hell was that? Hey, what are you doing? Call for backup.
While Nick and Hank try to hunt down the Chupacabra without letting Wu get committed to an asylum, things get dark for Monroe and Rosalie. They receive heavy threats from an extremist Vesson group that hates mixed marriages. They even left a dead fox on their doorstep, giving off the Godfather vibes. Nick tries to convince the infected doctor to cure himself, but the disease passes to his wife. In a tense rush at the spice shop lab, they manage to save the wife, but the doctor isn't as lucky and gets taken out. The episode ends in absolute chaos. Wu, drunk and pissed off at a bar, starts seeing monsters and picks a fight, getting arrested shortly after. Monroe, trying to be nice and bring a snack to the officer watching his house, finds out the hard way that the guard is a masked traitor and ends up kidnapped. And the cherry on top? Juliet, suffering from massive headaches, looks in the mirror and transforms into a Hexenbeast. Yeah, the spell literally backfired on the sorceress. The secret is out. Nick and Hank finally decide to come clean to Wu, who was locked up in the precinct thinking he had lost his mind. They take the sergeant to the magic trailer, show him the Grimm books, and explain that all those monsters he saw were real. Wu reacts surprisingly well, like, "Oh, so I'm not crazy, cool," and joins the team to help rescue Monroe. And Monroe is in a terrible situation. He was taken by the Vesson Rayim, a kind of racist Vesson sect that judges impure marriages. The poor guy is chained up in a warehouse and psychologically tortured, watching another prisoner being led to his execution. Nick discovers that Officer Acker is the precinct snitch and is working with the villains. The Grimm gets so furious he almost goes Hulk mode on a suspect in the interrogation room, needing to be held back by Hank.
Nick, you need to get out of here.
While Rosalie is on the verge of a nervous breakdown and being attacked by a Juliet transformed into a nightmare, the team discovers the cult's location, but Monroe manages to escape for a moment, runs through the forest only to be captured again. The episode ends with him being taken to a tribunal in the middle of the woods, surrounded by hooded maniacs ready to pass the final sentence, while Nick, Hank, and the newly initiated Wu race against time. The tension is pure. The atmosphere is sinister with the Vesson Rayim, which is basically an extremist sect. They are holding Monroe hostage and want to purify the poor guy in a bizarre tribunal in the middle of the woods, charging him with the crime of marrying Rosalie and being bros with a Grimm. At the precinct, the team races against time. Wu finally enters the circle of trust, and his reaction to seeing Bud transforming is priceless. The trial begins, and it is pure tension. They bring a kidnapped Bud to testify under threat of death, and the whole thing is about to turn into a Vesson barbecue with Monroe at the stake. But hold on, because Nick's squad arrives heavy. It's police, Grimm, Hexenbeast, and Pharmacist, everyone armed to the teeth. An insane shootout and general brawl ensue. Juliet shows she's not playing around and in a somewhat X-Men moment, explodes a villain's head using telekinesis. Monroe and Rosalie have their moment of vengeance. After the rescue, the dust settles, and the couple finally goes on their honeymoon with a police escort. But the icing on the cake is the ending. Juliet goes to Renard's house and, not knowing how to handle her new powers, reveals her Hexenbeast form to him. The captain's face is pure shock. Sometime later, we see 3 YouTube ghost hunters breaking into an abandoned house. The result? One of them ends up fried, literally, and not by a ghost, but by something electric. Nick and Hank take the case, and Wu confirms that the haunting is actually a Vesson capable capable of generating electricity, like Electro from Spider-Man, only more unstable. Meanwhile, Nick's domestic life is silent chaos. Juliet is freaking out about her transformation and asks Renard for help, who sends her to a specialist named Henrietta. On the way, there's a road rage scene where a jerk messes with Juliet and she nearly blows up the guy's car with the mind. Her power is spiraling out of control fast. Back on the case, they discover that the electric monster is a jealous husband who killed his wife and her lover years ago and now lives hallucinating in the house. The final confrontation is pure garage science. To avoid being electrocuted, Nick has to pierce his ear and apply a frog paste. Yes, seriously. It works, and he beats the Vesson down. In the end, Juliet discovers that reversing her condition will be nearly impossible, and to make matters worse, Renard starts bleeding mysteriously from bullet wounds that should have already healed. There's a new killer in town, and this beast is a pro. It's a manticore. Think of a lion with a scorpion tail, who works for the Vesson Council cleaning up those who break the rules. He takes out a fortune teller in a single strike. To add to the headache, Prince Victor and Adelind are back in town, putting total pressure on Renard to recover baby Diana. The Cold War vibe between the royals and the police is tense. Juliet continues her tests with Henrietta and discovers her power is absurd, capable of destroying everything around her if she doesn't control herself. The Vesson Council decides Nick has caused enough trouble and puts a bounty on his head. The Manticore assassin, being smart, invades the precinct, kills a guard, and escapes, determined to hit the Grimm where it hurts most, at his home. The hitman breaks into the house thinking Juliet is the damsel in distress. Big mistake. He attacks, but Juliet, full of new powers, defends herself with frightening ease. She grabs the monster's stinger with her bare hand and uses it to kill the assassin himself. When Nick arrives desperate, thinking he would find a tragedy, he sees the beast dead on the floor. Juliet gives it to him straight. "You can't protect me. I can handle myself." The tables have totally turned. You know that saying, "The roof is on fire"? In this episode, it's literal. A crazy guy walks into a store, strips down, with zero context, and simply ignites like the Human Torch from the Fantastic Four, roasting the place and the employees. The weirdest part? The fire comes from inside him. Nick and Hank arrive at the crime scene and realize they need specialized help. They pull Orson out of jail, that Bauerschwein, pig-face Vesson, with a historic feud with Monroe. The vibe at the spice shop gets heavier than an awkward Thanksgiving dinner with estranged relatives. Monroe wants to attack Orson, but Rosalie, sensible as always, focuses on the science. They need to create an ointment to stop the hothead from igniting. The investigation reveals the fire was commissioned by the store owner's own son in a classic insurance scam gone wrong. But the cherry on top is the final plan. The team, armed with super soakers, yes, toy water guns, drenches the villain in the ointment. The guy tries to flame on, can't release the heat, and explodes from the inside out. Meanwhile, at Nick's house, things are heating up in a different way. Adeline storms in full of attitude, thinking she owns the place. But Juliet isn't playing games. She awakens her Hexen Beast side, delivers a telekinetic beatdown on the blonde, and kicks her out. When Nick arrives, Juliet decides enough is enough with the secrets and reveals her new monstrous face to her boyfriend. Nick's shocked face says it all. The tension in Nick's house is unbearable after Juliet revealed her monstrous face. He can't even look at her without seeing his mortal enemy. Desperate, Nick turns to the mysterious Henrietta for help, and she doesn't mince words. Kill Juliet, or accept her for what she truly is. In the case of the week, we have something out of a gore horror movie. A man is killed and his foot is cut off. We discover that rabbit-like Vesson, Villahara, are being hunted by people who believe a rabbit's foot brings luck and fertility. Monroe and Rosalie infiltrate a fertility clinic to catch the culprits, and Rosalie steals the show by punching the corrupt nurse in the face.
Oh, no, you don't.
The hunter kidnaps the first victim's sister, Chloe, and takes her to a cabin in the woods to do the job. Nick and Hank arrive in the nick of time, but the girl is the real MVP. Chloe breaks free, grabs a steak, and turns the hunter into Swiss cheese before Hank finishes the job. In the end, 2 bombshells drop. Juliet demands action from Nick, who remains frozen and can't accept her new version. And Adeline, visiting Henrietta, finds out she's pregnant again. And doing the math, the father can only be Nick. This show's family tree just turned into a Gordian knot. Renard has had having bloody nightmares where his bullet wounds reopen, like a psychological horror movie. While he deals with this phantom trauma, a new scam is hitting the streets. A seductive guy and a femme fatale are pulling the old slip of Nicky routine, but with a supernatural twist. We find out that the con artist couple, Linus and Stacy, are actually the same person. It's a bi-gender Vesson that swaps bodies and personalities, basically Fight Club, but instead of Tyler Durden, we have a blonde bombshell. Monroe serves as bait in a bar, almost gets in trouble when the jealous husband appears, but the team manages to intervene. To solve this identity mess, Rosalie and Monroe cook up a hormone formula to lock the Vesson into one form. Nick uses his crossbow to hit Stacy, who reverts to Linus permanently. The guy goes to jail crying his eyes out because he lost the woman he loved, who was himself. Too complex even for Freud. In the dark subplot, Renard asks Juliet for help to open a magic book using Hexenbeast blood. The most unlikely alliance in the series is formed, and at a end, she's terrified the royals will find out about the new baby. The episode ends with Nick at home, drinking alone and missing the days when his problems were just normal monsters. Juliet wakes Renard up in the gentlest way possible, throwing a book at his bed and demanding answers. She's pissed because she turned into a Hexenbeast and wants her life back, threatening the captain if he doesn't fix the mess. Meanwhile, on a bike trail, we meet Bella, a girl who just wanted a peaceful ride. The problem is Zach, that typical pushy guy who won't take no for an answer. He tries to get closer, her skin reacts, and the man drops dead.
What's happening?
His face completely deformed. Nick and Hank take the case and discover Bella is a Folterzela, a type of human poison dart frog. If she feels threatened, her touch is lethal. The girl's grandmother, who bears a massive scar across her face, tries to cover everything up with a hot iron, literally attempting to brand her granddaughter's face to protect her and make her less attractive. On the royal side, Prince Kenneth arrives, a villain who isn't messing around. He starts by dispatching Renard's bodyguard and beating up Renard, proving the captain has no leverage and no strength. Back to the case of the week, Nick stops the crazy grandmother from burning Bella's face, and Rosalie prepares an experimental cocktail. The girl drinks the potion, and in a time jump, we see her on a date, green like Gamora, but finally able to touch her crush without killing him. The episode starts with a bizarre vibe at Renard's house. Juliet, totally corrupted by the dark side and ignoring that she hates the captain, decides to have an intimate moment with him. Meanwhile, Portland turns into a freezer. A guy breaks into a house asking for help and sucks all the heat out of the resident, leaving the woman frozen like a popsicle. Nick discovers we're dealing with Varmativ, cold-blooded Norwegian snakes that need to steal body heat to avoid eternal hibernation. And it's not just one. There are 3 brothers cleaning out the city. Juliet decides to show up at the spice shop and, tired of secrets, transforms in front of Rosalie and Monroe. The shock is total. The Grimm's girlfriend has turned into the monster they fear most. Following the trail of frozen bodies, Nick and the team find the villain's hideout, a superheated house with a secret trap door. Down below, a scene straight out of an Indiana Jones nightmare unfolds. A group of Vesson piled together, serving as living heat sources. Things go wrong. Chaos breaks out inside a barn, and Nick has to act fast to save the victims before they freeze to death. He manages to get almost everyone back to the hideout, rescuing those who are left behind. In a flash forward of Nick and Hank throwing hands, but hold on, we'll get there. In the present, Juliet is out of control. She goes to a bar, accepts a drink from a stranger, and when the guy tries to get handsy, she turns into the monster and throws him across the room, landing herself straight in jail. The worst part? She tells Nick she's loving this new power and that she's safer locked up away from him. The case of the week involves a vengeful Native American spirit called Mishipeshu. A janitor is killed at a school, and the trail leads to Simon, a native boy being possessed by the entity to avenge his father's murder. The spirit works like a supernatural game of hot potato. It leaves the boy and possesses none other than Hank. Nick's partner goes on a hallucinogenic trip in the forest, reliving the old crime through Simon's eyes. With the help of a shaman and some magic powder, they manage to expel the beast from Hank's body, but the spirit is stubborn. It possesses the local female deputy just to finish off the last killer on the list. In the end, justice is served, but the scare of seeing Hank possessed won't fade anytime soon. The mood starts with a camp that looks harmless, like Boy Scouts, but the Vesson version. The leader, Albert, is teaching the kids to hunt rabbits and assume their monstrous forms for the first time. Meanwhile, Juliet is in jail cosplaying Carrie, exploding vermin on the wall with her mind. Kenneth, who is a big shot with the Royals and looks like bad news, pays her bail. He gives it to her straight. Adeline is pregnant with Nick's child. Yeah, the soap opera is complete. Adeline, desperate, goes to the precinct and drops the bomb on Nick. The child is his, and she needs protection from Juliet, who is now full-blown villain. The blonde is so scared she uses Nick as a human shield when Juliet shows up looking for blood. There's a parallel mystery going on with Captain Renard. The guy is having bizarre blackouts, bleeding out of nowhere, and waking up in random places with water, while Nick and the team investigate murders near the camp. They discover that Maggie, the owner's daughter, took the ancestral hunt too seriously and is killing hitchhikers for sport. She completely loses it and attacks once again, but this time the shot backfires. The walker mistakes her for an animal and attacks her. Maggie's father arrives, and even with Nick doing everything he can to help, Maggie ends up dying in her father's arms. Proving tradition isn't always a good idea, but the final blow is heartbreaking. Juliet, totally dominated by hate and manipulated by Kenneth, goes to Aunt Marie's trailer, the Grimm Sanctuary, and torches the whole thing. She calls Nick just to let him know she's warming up. The woman has lost all control and destroyed his family's legacy. The trailer is gone, turned to ash, but the gang manages to save the weapons. Nick is fuming, but there's a bigger problem in town. A Jack copycat is loose in Portland killing Vess and prostitutes. And Renard is in the eye of the storm, having lucid dreams and waking up in pools. Spoiler, it's not sleepwalking. He's actually being possessed. Adeline and Rosalie go on a Breaking Bad supernatural mission to create a suppressant for Juliet. The secret ingredient? Pieces of Adeline's dead mother. Maximum gross out level, but necessary. Adeline drinks the mommy juice to test it and has a sinister astral trip, but the stuff works. The problem is, Juliet doesn't want to be saved. She's sided with the Royals now, and Kenneth convinces her to lure Nick's mother, the legendary Kelly, into a trap, using her missing granddaughter as bait. Nick tries one last desperate card. He calls Juliet to the spice shop to take the medicine, but she's acting like Dark Phoenix from X-Men, powerful and arrogant. She rejects the cure, throws everyone around with telekinesis, and forces Nick to point his gun at his own friend Monroe. The tension is absurd, and Nick's finger is on the trigger against his will. Hank saves the day by shoving Monroe before the shot goes off, and Juliet takes off, mocking them. Now the focus shifts to Renard. They discover that the spirit of the original Jack the Ripper hitched a ride in his body when he died and was resurrected. The ghost takes total control, kidnaps Wu, and goes on a hunt, holding the sergeant hostage on a terror ride. The only cure for the captain is to fake kill him to expel the spirit. They prepare a potion to simulate death and pump the guy full of rubber bullets. The plan is risky. Jack tries to resist and almost kills Rosalie, but ends up being expelled. Renard returns to normal, finally free. But it's not all celebration. Trouble returns to town decapitating bad guys, which is great, but she arrives too late to stop the real tragedy. Juliet set the perfect trap. Nick's mother, tough as always, falls into an ambush by the Royals in her son's own house. The end of this episode is the hardest gut punch of the series. Nick gets home and finds a cardboard box. Inside, it's not an Amazon package, but his mother's head. Kenneth and Juliet took Adeline's daughter and left this macabre gift. Nick's scream ends everything with a promise of brutal revenge. The situation here is heavier than a Game of Thrones season finale.
No! No!
Hank and Trouble realize it's a trap and need to snap Nick out of his trance before the Royals' henchmen have a field day. The vibe is total desperation with a GTA-style escape while agents search the house. Nick, now in full revenge mode, decides he's doing things his way. He doesn't care about police protocols. Meanwhile, Adeline, who is now on the good guys team, go figure with this show, gives the intel. Kenneth and Rispoli are at a luxury hotel. The group decides to hit the arsenal and gear up like they're going on a final RPG mission. Crossbows, clubs, and poisons. Nick's order regarding Juliet is clear. If you find her, kill her. Yeah, the love is dead. We get a moment of pure satisfaction when Nick finally catches Kenneth. Instead of arresting the guy, he handles it old school with his vambrace, sending the villain to hell. But the real brawl is at the royals' compound. The group invades the place, unleashing terror. The king thinks he's safe escaping by helicopter with Diana, but the pilot is none other than Meisner, who throws the old man out without a parachute. Diana, that creepy kid, actually smiles. Back home, the outcome is tragic. Juliet confronts Nick and asks to die. There's that fight between superpowered exes, and just as she's about to kill the protagonist, Trouble appears and puts 2 arrows in her. Juliet dies in Nick's arms in a heart-wrenching scene, but there's no time to cry. Agent Chavez and a tactical squad raid the house screaming, "Get her!" Chaos reigns. If you think you've had bad days, look at Nick. The guy wakes up after being drugged to find the crime scene scrubbed clean. Juliet's body is gone, his mom's head is missing, and they took Trouble. Basically, they did a macabre reset on his house. The detective is so paranoid he doesn't know what's real anymore, but he's sure of one thing. FBI agent Chavez is behind it, and he is livid, ready to go after her without a badge and with zero regard for danger. While Nick is practically going Joker, chasing Chavez and nearly crashing his car due to hallucinations, Adeline goes into labor. It's that bizarre contrast. Nick kidnapping a federal agent in the spice shop basement to extract information by force, and Rosalie trying to keep calm at the hospital. Chavez, seeing that Nick isn't playing around and is a badass Grimm, drops the bomb. A war is coming and they are rising. Get ugly when they go to a warehouse and fall into an ambush with some brutal Vesson. All hell breaks loose. Nick shows he can fight, but Chavez can't tank the injuries and dies, leaving only a good luck and Trouble's chess piece behind. With no answers and blood on his hands, Nick rushes to the hospital to see his son being born. In a primetime soap moment, Adeline names the baby Kelly in honor of her late mother-in-law, and an awkward truce forms between them.
I thought of a name for him.
Don't you think we should...
Kelly.
But outside, a mysterious claw mark appears, signaling that the peace won't last long. It feels like Nick is living in a bizarre sitcom where he lives with his former enemy and their newborn son, while trying to sell the house that was the scene of beheadings and invasions. But the grim life doesn't stop. We have a classic white-collar crime case, but with monsters. An executive discovers funds being embezzled and is killed by Wemlinger. While Nick tries to play house and protect baby Kelly, he and Hank discover that this Wemlinger is a wanted fugitive. The police try to hold the guy, but some U.S. Marshals show up to take him away, thinking they're dealing with a common criminal. Nick tries to warn them, but, as always, nobody listens to the protagonist. Result? The marshals become gas station snacks. Classic horror movie where the cops ignore the obvious warning. The investigation leads them to Betty, an old lady who seemed harmless, but was actually the mastermind behind the scheme and Wemlinger's handler. After a chase where Wu finally shines and runs over shoots the monster, they corner Betty, but the woman is on an absurd level of fanaticism. She deletes files, including a photo of Captain Renard, which is super suspicious, drops the mysterious phrase Occultatum Libera, and throws herself out the window. The mystery of the claw and this sect keeps growing, and Meisner is lurking, coming out of a cell all bruised up, indicating his training has been hardcore. No one is safe. Nick and Adeline are finally moving into a new loft, trying to hide the address from everyone like celebrities fleeing paparazzi. The vibe is kinda weird. After all, they have that complicated history of mortal enemies who now have a kid, but they're trying to make it work for baby Kelly's sake. Meanwhile, at the spice shop, Rosalie and Monroe are going about their lives, missing the old Juliet, but the piece ends quickly when some kids appear out of nowhere. They look harmless, like Peter Pan's lost boys, but the vibe here is way more macabre. They accidentally killed their previous mother and decided Rosalie is the perfect candidate for the vacancy. They kidnap Rosalie in broad daylight using chloroform and everything. Monroe gets desperate and calls Nick. The team discovers that this group of Vesson children lives in the forest and has a very dark history of kidnapping women to be their mothers. And when they try to escape, well, it doesn't end well. In captivity, things get tense. The leader, Peter, gives that needy psychopath speech. If you try to run, we'll kill you. Rosalie, being sensible, tries to play along and even tells bedtime stories about Grimms cutting off heads. When Nick, Hank, and Monroe finally find the camp, a confrontation ensues. The kids show their true Vesson faces, and Rosalie, to defend herself, transforms too. But instead of a fight, the little girl in the group recognizes Rosalie as an equal, and a bizarre group hug happens. In the end, the kids go into the system, but fall into the hands of a director who makes them swear loyalty to a mysterious sect with an occultatum libera. opera, and to wrap up the mystery package, Meisner appears rescuing Trouble from a cell. The circus is coming to town. Nick and Adelaide's domestic life is just beautiful. Baby crying with colic and them trying to cook rice without burning the house down. They look like a normal couple, if you ignore everything else.
And turn it down.
The rice is down. Turn the baby down.
Why don't you try? Let me deal with the rice. Okay.
Meanwhile, in the Vesson underworld, a crime boss decides to hold a medieval reality show for his daughter Emily's hand. The suitor's mission? Kill Frankie Adkins. 3 candidates enter the contest. The first attempts the job, but, plot twist, is brutally murdered by a mysterious monster before he can touch Frankie. Frankie, poor guy, watches everything from under a car, understanding nothing, thinking he got a very ugly, hairy guardian angel. Nick and Hank jump on the investigation and discover this is the Mog Zoektocht, basically a scavenger hunt for murder to arrange a marriage. The problem is, every time a suitor tries to kill Frankie, the monster appears and saves the day by tearing the assassin apart. In the end, it wasn't the bride's father or an unlikely hero. It was Emily herself. The girl didn't want to marry any of those losers and solved the problem her own way, eliminating the competition. In a scuffle at the mobster's house, Frankie, already traumatized and paranoid, ends up shooting Emily's father. We discover that Emily was killing her suitors to stop them from killing her father, and Nick explains that Emily won't be arrested because her father is the one truly responsible for everything. Nick returns home exhausted from this Vesson soap opera, and just when he thinks he's going to rest, he finds Trouble all beaten up and half dead at his door. The piece lasted exactly 0 minutes. Nick rushes Trouble to the hospital and things look bad. While she's under observation, Nick goes through her stuff and discovers the girl has turned into a 007, fake passports, cash, and a motorcycle equipped with missiles and high-tech gear. The upgrade was heavy. Nearby, some hooligans decide to disturb the peace of some rat Vesson at a dump. Terrible idea. They end up summoning an urban legend, the Recent Rat, or Rat King. Imagine a Godzilla made of hundreds of rats stuck together. It's that level of gross. At the hospital, the phone rings, and it's Meisner warning. They know where she is, get her out of there now. And sure enough, fake doctors try to kidnap Trouble. Nick comes in with a flying kick, laying a brutal beatdown on the villains. Meisner even takes out a traitor nurse in the elevator with absolute coldness. Nick returns to the dump monster case. The whole team, Nick, Hank, Monroe, Rosalie, and even one of the victim's girlfriends, who is forced to help, goes to the sewers. When the giant Rat King appears, bullets don't do a thing. The solution? Lure the big guy under high voltage wires. Hank shoots the wires, and we get a giant rat barbecue. The monster breaks apart into several little rats. Everything resolved, sort of. Nick takes Trouble home. She wakes up wanting to talk, but Nick only has one question on his mind. Who the hell is Meisner, and what is happening? The global conflict is knocking at the door. Things have officially heated up in Portland. A guy named Dallas Cruz is barking orders to a Fight Club-style rebel group, and at midnight the chaos begins. Stores destroyed and owners beaten. It's basically a Vesson purge night, and the baker Xavier ends up being taken with a bag over his head. Meanwhile, Trouble wakes up in Nick's loft after a 25-hour nap and finally spills the beans. She reveals she is working for Hadrian's Wall, HW, an ultra-secret government organization, sort of the shield of the supernatural world. They are at war against Black Claw, a revolutionary group that wants to take over the world. And Trouble is recruiting Grimms because this business is global. When Nick and the team investigate Xavier's disappearance, they find a claw mark spray-painted on the wall. They find the baker scared to death in a warehouse, but he refuses to say who kidnapped him. Only after intense psychological pressure from Rosalie and Monroe does Xavier indirectly hint that it was Billy Trump. Nick and Hank squeeze Billy. Even Captain Renard shows his Vesson face to give her a scare. She caves and agrees to take the gang to Dallas's hideout, but there's a smell of a trap in the air. When they arrive at the factory, Monroe's phone rings and the jig is up. Xavier had set it all up under threat. They are surrounded by a Vesson army. Ammo is running low, and it looks like the end of the line for our Grimm. Nick goes toe-to-toe with Dallas, but is getting the worst of it. Suddenly, the villain is lifted into the air by an invisible force, Darth Vader choking style. From the shadows emerges none other than Juliet. But hold on, she's different, with a blonde wig and a Terminator vibe. The team is in total shock, looking like they've seen a ghost. And they have. Juliet is alive, but now goes by the name Eve and acts like a programmed assassin robot for Hadrian's Wall. Trouble explains to Nick that HW turned Juliet into a living weapon because she is a hardcore level Hexen beast. While the gang tries to process that the dead ex-girlfriend has turned into a super agent, the Vesson Council is having a meeting in another part of the world, and that's where a massacre occurs. Red Wedding style from Game of Thrones. A Black Claw traitor stands up, shouts their slogan, and machine guns everyone. Only Alexander escapes. The message is sent. The revolution has begun, and they aren't playing around. Back in Portland, Xavier, the traitor Baker, is in jail, thinking he's safe. Wishful thinking. A cellmate reveals himself as a Black Claw plant, turns into a coyote, and attacks the man in front of the guards, just to send a message. Nick finally meets the new Juliet at a restaurant. The chat is tense. She says she feels nothing anymore, and that the old Juliet is gone. To prove her point, she uses telekinesis to burst a Vesson's eardrums and dispatches 2 other henchmen without even breaking a sweat. Meisner calls Nick and warns him, that was just a test to see if the Grimm could handle the new reality. It looks like we have a low-budget version of the Loch Ness Monster terrorizing Diamond Lake. A couple is attacked while fishing, and we soon discover it's not just any animal, but an aquatic Vesson having a field day. Nick and Hank investigate and run into the Dunbar brothers, who own a shop by the lake and are making a killing selling merchandise to curious and scared folks. It's the perfect con: create panic and sell the solution, or souvenirs. Nick figures out the brothers are Vesson and are setting everything up with a third guy, Logan, who is the real aquatic killer. Meanwhile, at the secret base, Eve gives Nick a reality check, telling him to stop living in the past and focus on the war that's happening. Trouble decides to handle the lake situation her way. She jumps in pretending to be a bounty hunter and discovers the Dunbar brothers are betraying each other. One of them wants Logan dead so he doesn't have to split the cash. Trouble takes the job, invades the scene, and snaps the monster's neck with the greatest of ease. The surviving brother Wayne tries to escape by jumping into the lake transformed, but the spell backfires. The locals, thinking he is the killer monster, fill the water with lead. Long story short, the plan to get rich turned into fish food, and Nick realizes reality is getting weirder by the minute. Nick continues the saga of trying to open the mysterious tunnel door, but it's tough going. Meanwhile, Trouble and Eve are in elite spy mode, hunting a Black Claw messenger. Eve, who is increasingly robotic and scary, makes it clear her patience is zero and even performs some basic torture, sealing the prisoner's mouth, eyes, and ears with his own skin. Sinister is an understatement, but the focus of the episode is a killer who is taking the expression "make it rain" too seriously. The guy is killing people in ancient rituals, midsummer style, to end a drought. Monroe and Rosalie, who are basically the group's supernatural Wikipedia, discover it's a Fulcre ritual involving the alignment of the stars of Ursa Major. In other words, the killer is drawing a constellation with corpses on the city map. The investigation leads the police to Mark, a guy who looks guilty, but is actually just a desperate father watching his son Jonathan join a radical Vesson cult. Monroe decides to infiltrate a meeting of these fanatics to see what the leader is up to, but things spiral out of control, and Mark ends up getting beaten by the brothers of the cult. In the end, Nick and Hank race against time because only one victim, is left to complete the ritual. They arrive at the cemetery just as the real killer, Duncan Fargo, is about to dispatch a homeless man. The police solve it with bullets, save the last victim, and ironically, it starts to rain right after. Coincidence or black magic? Better not to ask. Things heat up when Monroe's uncle Felix calls saying he found the holy grail of collectors, a chest full of ancient Grimm books. He comes to Portland to negotiate, but he doesn't come alone. There are 2 Anubi, jackal-headed mummy Vesson, on his tail, dying to get this treasure. Amidst this, there's that awkward dinner at Nick's loft. Monroe gets philosophical about how Nick has already been with Juliet, Adeline pretending to be Juliet, and is now living with Adeline while his ex has turned into a biological weapon called Eve. Yeah, the Grimm's love life is a soap opera. Felix arrives asking for 100 grand for the books. Hadrian's Wall even considers paying, but before the deal closes, the Anubi track the uncle down and kill him. Monroe is devastated but channels his sadness into turning into a raging beast. He and Nick find out where the killers are intercepting the cargo and go for revenge. Monroe leaves no stone unturned and shreds the guys. When they finally open Felix's chest, the surprise is huge. Besides weapons and genealogical books showing all the Grimm families, which would be a disaster in the villain's hands, they find a false bottom with 3 of the 7 legendary keys. Combining them with the 2 Nick already had, they assemble the map and discover where the Crusaders' treasure is buried, in the Black Forest, Germany. Looks like we're going on an international trip. The episode kicks off with Nick and Monroe planning an Indiana Jones-style excursion to Germany. They analyze the map of the keys and realize that X marks the spot using old churches as reference points. Meanwhile, the romance finally clicks into gear. Adeline confesses her feelings to Nick, there's a kiss, and well, they finally hit the sheets as a real couple, leaving the messy past behind. In Portland, politics are on fire. Literally, a sniper assassin named Marwan is in town, and no one knows who the target is. The Hadrian's Wall team and the police try to track the guy down in a game of cat and mouse, but the subject is slippery. On the day of a big rally, Marwan takes position and, in front of everyone, lands a perfect shot on mayoral candidate Andrew Dixon. Renard, who is on stage, catches the guy in his arms, striking a hero pose for the cameras. All very suspicious and convenient for the captain. Over in Germany, Nick and Monroe arrive in the small town of Wolfach. They find an ancient church but end up attracting the attention of a priest who, guess what, is an evil Wesen and realizes Nick is a Grimm. While the dynamic duo heads up the hill and finds the foundations of where the treasure should be, the priest gathers a mob to hunt them down. Nick and Monroe start digging, find a stone with chisel marks, and in true ancient temple trap style, the floor gives way. The two plummet into a dark hole without knowing what's down there, leaving us on the edge of our seats until the next episode. Nick and Monroe are in that dark hole they fell into, Indiana Jones style, and realize they're in a catacomb full of bones. And it's not just any cemetery. The skeletons are hiding the treasure they've been looking for. Eve, who is basically a Terminator now, tracks the guy and uses her telekinetic powers to throw a cyclist at him. Yes, she runs the villain over with a bicycle and steals his phone. Back in Germany, Nick and Monroe discover the secret: 7 glowing skulls that form a G and hide a mysterious box. But since nothing comes easy, as soon as they grab the treasure, they have to flee from an angry mob led by a priest. They use the old slash the tires tactic on their pursuers and race to the airport. In Portland, things get tense at the spice shop. Tony, a toxic ex-boyfriend of Rosalie's, shows up demanding money and assaults the poor woman. Adeline tries to help and, surprise, her Hex and Beast powers come back in full force. She breaks the guy's fingers with just her mind, Carrie style. Nick and Monroe arrive home safe and sound, but Monroe has a rotting arm from a bite he took in Germany. They finally open the mysterious box using the 7 keys. What's inside? The Holy Grail? Gold? No, it's an old wooden stick wrapped in a cloth. The disappointment is general, until Monroe starts going into septic shock and nearly dies. In desperation, Nick touches the stick to him and boom, the werewolf's arm heals instantly. Yeah, looks like the little stick is actually magic. The group is still trying to figure out how a piece of wood cured Monroe faster than a video game medkit. They decide to keep it a secret because, you know, imagine if this falls into the wrong hands. Meanwhile, in the underground wrestling world, we meet Goyo, a fighter who just takes beatings. Tired of being a punching bag, he goes to Benito, a mask maker who dabbles in heavy magic. Goyo signs a contract in his own blood, the classic rookie mistake in horror movies, to get a mask made of Wesen skin. The mask transforms the guy. He enters the ring and destroys his opponent, completely ignoring the fight script. The problem is that the accessory drives him insane and aggressive. Goyo gets addicted to the power, kills his rival in an alley, and then goes back to attack the mask's creator. Renard continues to be seduced by the dark side of politics. The Black Claw team wants to transform him into the hero mayor, and Eve discovers that his campaign knew about Dixon's assassination before it happened. Mick and Hank find Goyo freaking out at the mask shop, beating poor Benito to death. The kid is possessed, and no one can get the mask off him. The solution? Monroe and Rosalie prepare a ceremony and throw a boiling liquid on the guy's face. The Wesen skin mask finally peels off, but the damage is done. Goyo goes to jail, traumatized, and the secret of the Wesen skin masks goes into the Grimm books. Nick, sharp as ever, decides to hide the box with the magic stick inside the loft walls and plasters over it, ensuring no one finds it. it. The case of the week starts with Doyle, a guy who gets into a car accident and claims he was attacked by a dog. Except Monroe's nose doesn't lie. The smell at the scene is of death and something like a blute bud, but spoiled. They discover they are dealing with a lycanthrope, basically a werewolf with a genetic disease that drives them mad on full moon nights. While they investigate, politics is boiling over. Renard tries to convince Adeline that he can bring their daughter Diana back, using this to manipulate the Hexenbeast. Eve, in spy mode, breaks into Renard's campaign manager's house and confirms he is up to his neck in the plot to become mayor. The police think Doyle is the monster and arrest him, but the guy flees in desperation. When Nick and the gang corner him, they discover the sad truth. He isn't the monster, his mother is. The young man was just trying to protect the old lady, who locks herself up but ends up escaping. The chase heads into the forest, and Doyle's mother, fully transformed and out of control, attacks Wu. The scene is dramatic. Doyle tries to calm his mother amidst the savagery, but she doesn't recognize anyone and charges. With no choice, Nick and Hank have to shoot her.
I've got this. Mom, you're not gonna hurt me.
Doyle weeps over his mother's body in a heartbreaking finale, and to wrap things up with a flourish of doom, Wu gets home and notices a scratch on his leg. Anyone who's seen a zombie or werewolf movie knows that little scratch is going to cause a major headache. On another day, at a mall, we see Summer and Amy testing out makeup until they're approached by Malcolm, a photographer with that classic pickup line, "You're really photogenic, you should be a model." Summer falls for it, goes to his studio, and after a few clicks and some suspicious water, passes out. Malcolm then reveals his true monstrous face. He is a beetle-like Vesson, Musai, that latches onto the victim's face and sucks their youth like it's a milkshake straw. The result? The girl wakes up and begins to age rapidly and dies shortly after. It's basically the worst skincare tutorial in history. Meanwhile, Nick and the team discover that this elixir of youth is being sold as a miracle cream by Dr. Forbes. The doctor is so addicted to the product that his face starts to deform, but he thinks he looks gorgeous. Rosalie, brave as always, decides to infiltrate the clinic as a client. The plan almost goes south when Forbes tries to force the cream on her. In the final confrontation at the studio, things get ugly. Malcolm turns into the big monster to attack Nick, but takes a collective beating. Amidst the confusion, Dr. Forbes himself, completely hallucinating, kills Malcolm to protect his supply of beauty, but ends up dying shortly after because the cream was toxic. And to close with a bizarre flourish, Eve prepares a potion, inhales vapor from a witch's hat, and physically transforms into Captain Renard. Nick and the gang are analyzing videos of a pastor named Dwight, who performs live exorcisms in a tent. The guy contorts, screams, and expels the devil. But in reality, he is just a furious Ruby and Vesson faking possession to make a buck. The problem is that the faithful believe too much. A guy named Benjamin films everything secretly. A fight breaks out with security, and one of them ends up dead. The plot thickens when Nick discovers that Dwight isn't a villain, just a guy using his gift to put on a show. But the church fanatics, led by his ex-wife Joan, think the devil keeps returning to his body and decide they need to save the pastor by force. They kidnap the poor guy and start a medieval ritual with hot irons. It's pure agony. Nick and Hank arrive in the nick of time, but the damage is already done. Dwight dies in his ex's arms, who swears she was doing him a favor. Parallel to this, we have the most awkward espionage mission ever. Eve, still in Renard's body, goes to Rachel's house to find out what Black Claw is planning. The problem? Rachel wants to celebrate in bed. Eve tries to stall but ends up having to face the situation to maintain her cover. In the end, Eve is traumatized by the unsolicited intimacy, while discovering that Renard is being manipulated to become mayor. We have an opening worthy of a J-horror movie. A young man named Brian is buried up to his neck in sand and decapitated by a samurai sword. Nick and Hank investigate and discover this is the work of an Inugami, a type of ghost dog Vesson that serves as a guardian and avenger for families. The motive? Revenge for an old accident where Brian and his friend Roger accidentally killed a boy named Kuma. While Monroe and Rosalie play Indiana Jones exploring secret tunnels under the loft and run into skeletons, the Inugami goes after the next target, Roger. The lawyer for Kuma's family, Takeshi, is the monster of the hour, taking loyalty to a psychopathic level. He kidnaps Roger and attempts the sword ritual on a bridge, but Nick arrives for the rescue. A sword versus Grimm fight ensues, and Kuma's father intervenes to stop more bloodshed, proving that honor isn't about going around killing teenagers. Amidst this confusion, Eve shows up at the loft to deliver a sinister warning to Adelind. Black Claw is coming for her and the children, and as if that wasn't enough, Renard arrives home to find the surprise Rachel prepared. His daughter Diana is back. The girl has glowing purple eyes and a vibe of the orphan with superpowers, making it clear the captain's life is about to get very complicated. Things start chaotic with a drunk driver crashing his car, but his bad luck isn't the crash, it's who shows up to help. Charlie, a Vesson who, instead of calling 911, decides the guy will become a calcium supplement. Meanwhile, Wu is in a choking cat vibe, coughing up hairballs with blood and seeing his hand turn into a hairy claw and back again. The guy is freaking out, rightfully so, and thinking he's losing his mind. Nick and Hank are investigating the boneless bodies, and Rosalie discovers the monster is attracted to the smell of death. The genius plan? Use Monroe as bait, soaked in perfume that reeks of a corpse. The plan almost goes bad because Wu, who was on lookout, turns into a caveman out of nowhere, trips, and passes out. Charlie, smelling easy prey, decides to take Wu away to serve as dinner for his elderly parents. Yes, it's a macabre Uber Eats for cannibal old folks. Nick and Hank arrive in time. Charlie tries to flee and ends up run over by a truck. The bizarre climax is watching Charlie's parents mourn their son's death while gnawing on bones. A family that eats together stays together, I guess. To wrap up the package of doom, Renard sets up an ambush, drugs Adelind, and kidnaps her. She wakes up face to face with her lost daughter Diana in a forced and very unhealthy family reunion. Wu wakes up in the hospital, and the doctors think he's a medical miracle with strange blood, but the reality is he's turning into the Hulk, Grimm version. The guy has vivid hunting dreams, and when he leaves the hospital, he realizes a Black Claw goon is on his tail. The result? Wu turns into a monster, shreds the stalker, and turns back to normal, remembering nothing. Rosalie makes a cocktail to recover his memory, and we find out he is now a primal Wu, thanks to that werewolf scratch from past episodes. Elsewhere, things look bad for Adelind. Bonaparte, the Black Claw boss, gives a Godfather-style ultimatum. Either she joins them and forms a happy family with Renard and Diana, or she dies. Diana, by the way, is getting scarier by the minute, using telepathic voodoo to communicate with Eve, almost frying the ex-Juliet's brain. Hank continues to be blinded by love for Zuri, not realizing she's playing for the villain's team. He even shows her the house, the naive poor guy. In the end, Adelind realizes there is no way out. To protect her children, she packs a bag, leaves a goodbye note for Nick, which magically disappears after being read. Nick is livid about Adelind's disappearance and goes after Renard, but the house is empty. The blonde is trapped in a mansion, being forced to play house. Diana, who is basically the child from The Omen with superpowers, manipulates her parents into holding hands and locks Renard in her mother's room. Meanwhile, Hank finally discovers he's been played for a fool. A guy named Tony breaks into Zuri's house to clone his phone. Hank comes back, beats the hell out of Tony, who is a Vesson, and finds out Zuri set the whole thing up. Nick stages a play, pretends he's taking Zuri into protection, but it's just to see if she calls Bonaparte. Said and done. The traitor is taken to the HW base, where Eve handles the interrogation her way, literally gluing Zuri's mouth shut so she can't speak. Total horror movie scene. Renard tries to bring Nick to the dark side of the Force, giving that classic villain speech, but Nick doesn't fall for it. Wu, for his part, learns to control his transformation, becoming a secret weapon for the team. The episode closes with the nightmare becoming reality. Renard wins the mayoral election. He goes on stage with Adelind, Diana, and baby Kelly in his arms, posing as the perfect American family. Nick watches it all on TV, looking like he's about to commit a crime, and mutters a "you're dead" to Renard. War has been declared. The heat is officially on in Portland. Renard is now the mayor, and Black Claw feels like they own the place. Things get ugly for Hank when 2 bodies are found in his living room. It's that classic cop movie setup. They plant the bodies and a fake witness to take the guy out of circulation. Nick and Wu try to investigate, but soon realize the precinct is infested with enemy Vesson. Meanwhile, at the Mansion of Evil, little Diana proves she is the scariest child on TV. She grabs some dolls and plays a real-life version of The Sims, forcing Renard and Adeline to kiss against their will. The vibe is bizarre, and Adeline realizes her daughter is extremely dangerous. On the other side of town, the Hadrian's Wall base is attacked. It's a total massacre. Meisner, the toughest guy in the series, holds the line John Wick style, but ends up cornered by Renard and Bonaparte. In a heartbreaking scene, Renard chooses the dark side and finishes Meisner off. As for Diana, who didn't like Rachel, her dad's mistress, she solves the problem via astral projection and suffocates the woman with her own bed sheets. Sinister doesn't even cover it. Nick, pissed off about Meisner's death, storms the precinct and goes after Renard. The fight destroys the whole office but ends with Nick arrested and surrounded by enemies. The situation is looking grim, with Nick behind bars. Black Claw thinks they've won the game, but they forgot that Team Grimm doesn't mess around. Monroe and Rosalie find out they're going to be parents. Best and worst timing possible, while Eve decides to clear the area by exploding some henchmen's heads with her mind. Total Jean Grey vibes. Renard and Bonaparte try to break Nick, but he enters an induced nightmare and nearly loses his mind. The gang manages to rescue Nick in an insane shootout at the precinct, and Eve ends up gravely wounded in a duel of powers with Bonaparte. Back at the loft, Nick uses that magic stick they found in the Black Forest to heal Eve. It works, but she enters a bizarre trance, looking like her operating system rebooted, and then chaos reigns. Black Claw invades the hideout. Nick decides to stay behind to buy time while the rest of the crew flees through a secret tunnel. Nick becomes a one-man army, killing everyone, until he takes multiple shots to the chest, but the stick made Nick immortal. He gets up ready for more, but Bonaparte and Renard arrive to finish the job. Just when it seems like it's over, little Diana from back at her house uses a voodoo doll on Bonaparte. Renard, controlled by his daughter, runs the villain through with a sword. The episode ends with the 2 of them staring at each other, understanding nothing. In the tunnels, the Scooby Squad tries to find a way out. Rosalie finally tells Monroe she's pregnant, and there's a cute moment in the middle of the sewer. Eve wakes up from her trance, seeming like a different person, feeling emotions again, but seeing strange symbols related to death. The gang gathers at the spice shop, but the peace is short-lived. Renard, now fully pissed and haunted by Meisner's ghost, literally or guilt, who knows, uses the power of the mayor's office to hunt Nick down. He orders the SWAT team to turn the city upside down. Nick hides in Bud's repair shop, but the police close the net. It's the classic cat and mouse game. Renard manages to track Nick's car and orders the place surrounded. Meanwhile, Adeline and Nick have a quick reunion, but she is trapped in Renard's political web because of the kids. In the end, Eve tries to use her powers but fails. The squad is cornered in the shop with police banging on the door and Renard commanding the operation outside. The season ends with tension sky high. No exit, no magic, and an army pointing guns at them. The heat is officially on at Bud's shop. The place is surrounded by a CERT team that looks like they walked straight out of a Call of Duty game, and the tension is palpable. Nick wants to turn himself in to save the gang, but Trouble and Eve enter no-way mode. Outside, Renard is feeling like the Emperor himself, ordering the arrest of even Hank and Wu. The guy is so full of himself, he doesn't even realize the power has gone to his head. When the SWAT team storms the shop, a classic Deus Ex Machina moment happens. That magic stick Nick carries releases a shockwave that knocks everyone out, shown in anime style. Nick takes advantage of everyone taking a forced nap and bolts, even wearing a police uniform to escape with a straight face. Meanwhile, the political drama continues. Renard is in a bind but is too confident. Nick needs to negotiate and Adeline suggests a trust me not. Basically, it's a magical blood pact. If anyone breaks the promise, the knot tightens and strangles the person. Super chill and zero pressure, right? They make the deal. Nick clears Renard's name if he clears Nick's, but Renard is slippery as soap. In court, the judge, who is also Vesson and in his pocket, dismisses the case instantly. And guess what? Renard looks Hank and Adeline in the face and says the deal is off. The villain leaves laughing, orders everyone to resign, and goes home thinking he won the game. proving corrupt politicians are the same in any universe. Renard's ego is bigger than all of Portland, but Team Grimm has a plan that's Mission Impossible mixed with Harry Potter. Eve prepares a turbocharged polyjuice potion to transform Nick into Renard. The only problem, Nick needs to strip naked for the transformation to happen, creating that classic awkward moment while everyone tries to look at the ceiling. The transformation works, and now we have two Renards. Nick, in the captain's skin, goes on live TV and plays the masterstroke. He abdicates the mayor's office and admits the hunt for the Grimm was all a setup. The real Renard, watching from home, has a massive hissy fit and smashes the TV. It's priceless watching the villain lose everything he built in seconds. The final confrontation happens on the roof, 90s action movie style. It's Renard versus Renard, punches here, kicks there, until they get tired and decide to negotiate. The deal is tense. Everyone stays in their corner, and the real Renard agrees to swallow his pride so he doesn't lose the rest of his dignity. But the best is saved for last. When Nick returns home still wearing Renard's face, little Diana, who is basically the scariest kid in the series, realizes that isn't her daddy. The girl uses telekinesis and throws Nick through a wall like he's a rag doll. Lesson of the day, never try to trick a superpowered witch child.
No, honey, Nick is just trapped in Daddy's body. It's not his fault.
Renard is starting to lose his marbles. He's seeing Meisner's ghost everywhere, chatting with the dead guy like it's normal. While the captain deals with this psychological haunting, a new Vesson shows up, and this one is bizarre. The El Quegle, a three-armed, three-eyed monster that looks like it walked out of a Guillermo del Toro nightmare. The creature has a terrible habit. It kidnaps babies. But wait, the plot twist is that he swears he only does it to stop these kids from becoming murderers in the future. It's basically the plot of Minority Report, only with an ugly monster instead of Tom Cruise. The target this time is baby Augie, and the kid's parents aren't much help, living in a toxic vibe that makes everyone suspicious. Meanwhile, Eve continues her Doctor Strange saga in the tunnels, and tries to mess with the magic stick, but ends up with her hand burned and marked by mysterious symbols, proving that messing with ancient relics never goes well. Nick and Hank manage to track the triple monster. The fight is ugly, and the creature puts up a struggle with all those arms, but ends up falling down the stairs. Before dying, he gives a cryptic warning about the bears. In the end, the baby is saved, but seeing the parents fighting violently over a teddy bear blanket leaves a heavy mood in the air. Was the monster right? And will this baby grow up to be a problem? Food for thought. A lunatic named William Stillman literally climbs out of the ground, looking like a Walking Dead extra who forgot to shower. He chases a guy on a cell phone, says he's hungry, and wham! Sticks a finger into the guy's neck. Meanwhile, at Nick's house, Eve is drawing symbols on the tunnel walls like a conspiracy theorist in a mystery movie. Renard, on the other hand, is living a psychological horror at home, seeing Meisner's ghost in every corner. He even attempts a technological exorcism at a pawn shop, entering a bizarre machine. But it only results in him flying out in an explosion and losing his rings. Nick and Hank investigate the dead guy's body and discover the killer, Stillman, is a Vesson who only surfaces every 7 years for a snack. Very Jeepers Creepers vibe. The monster is already on to the next one. He set up a date with a girl named Mandy at a bar and is taking her to the park, believing he's going to have the girl for dinner. Nick, Hank, and Wu arrive to stop the massacre and get into a brawl with Stillman. The creature has tough skin and withstands punches and bullets, but the plot twist is sensational. The victim, Mandy, transforms into a giant hippo and bites Stillman. The predator became lunch meat. In the end, Renard wakes up in an empty shop, and Meisner's ghost drops that catchphrase to prove the captain is officially going crazy. Dan Wells is living in a hotel and is more paranoid than a horror movie protagonist before dying. The guy locks everything, puts chains on the door, and is terrified to sleep. And with good reason. A monster called an Alpi invades the room, paralyzes the poor guy, and feeds on his sleep. It's sleep paralysis on steroids. While Nick and the gang try to decipher the symbols Eve drew, which look like a star map, Renard continues his saga with Meisner's ghost. The imaginary friend now serves as a tactical GPS, helping Renard dispatch some assassins in a garage just like John Wick. To catch the sleep monster, Monroe volunteers as bait. The strategy is genius. He goes to the hotel to sleep. The Alpi attacks, paralyzes Monroe, who lies there motionless watching everything, but Hank and Nick break down the door in time. They follow the monster through a secret passage and discover the creature is the hotel owner, Beverly. Nick, in merciless Grimm mode, gives her the option to get out of town. She pretends to accept, tries to attack, and ends up dying alone by hitting her head. The episode closes with Eve and Rosalie realizing the star symbols don't point to the past, but to a date in the future. The apocalypse has a scheduled date. It's Monroe's birthday, and the the gang goes to a fancy hotel to celebrate, but a waiter named Randy, who is the son of a guy Nick arrested in the past, decides to get revenge. The genius plan? Spike the wine with a love potion called Amor de Infierno. The result is a mess worthy of a dating reality show. Hank falls madly in love with his own reflection in the mirror, singing serenades to himself. Wu becomes a simp for a random waitress. Monroe, who is married, starts declaring his love for Eve. Eve, in turn, wants Nick, and Nick, he's on his knees declaring himself to Rosalie. It's a bizarre swinging couples situation with everyone fighting and crying in the hallway. Meanwhile, in a parallel plot, little Diana has been kidnapped by a guy named Grossant, but the girl is sinister. She uses telepathy to throw the kidnapper against the walls like a rag doll. The villain leaves crying, literally. Back at the Hotel of Chaos, the waiter Randy tries to throw Wu's crush off a cliff. Wu turns into his primal version and throws Randy down there. With the Avengers' death, the spell breaks. Everyone wakes up from the hypnosis in that awkward who kissed who atmosphere, and Eve saw a skull coming out of the bathroom mirror just to ensure the peace lasted 3 seconds. The gang is gathered, trying to decipher ancient mysteries, with Monroe floating a theory that mythological constellations might actually be Vessin from space or another dimension. Meanwhile, Eve remains obsessed with the mirror and the bizarre skull she saw earlier. She's channeling a serious, gothic Snow White vibe, staring at her reflection until, out of nowhere, an arm shoots out of the mirror and tries to strangle the poor woman. She fights back with a bite and passes out, proving that messing with the supernatural barehanded is a recipe for disaster. Across town, we have a plot twist worthy of Frankenstein. Scientists are dying in brutal ways, and naturally Nick and Hank step in. We discover that a certain Dr. Shelley, playing Dodd, decided to fix his son, who died in an accident, by using body parts from various Vessin. The result, Patrick was brought back to life, but he is completely unstable, with limbs that transform into random monsters. He is basically a flesh and Vessin Megazord, thirsty for revenge against the doctors who created him. The situation spirals out of control when Patrick goes after his creators. The police arrive right at the peak of the chaos. The doctor, seeing the monstrosity he created and unable to control his son, makes the heaviest decision possible. He kills his creation and then attempts to take his own life in front of everyone. A tragic and bloody ending. At the hospital, Eve wakes up and drops a bombshell on Nick. Whatever is in the mirror isn't just watching, it's coming here, and time is running out.
I don't think we have a lot of time left before it gets here.
While Eve and Nick try to figure out how to handle the threat from the mirror, nature decides to strike back. In a local forest, poachers and people dumping toxic waste start disappearing. And this isn't your average disappearance. It's full-on eco-horror style. The victims are dragged away and killed by killer vines. Nick, Hank, and Wu go to investigate and find a bizarre tree with human faces embedded in its bark, looking like a macabre work of art or a deleted scene from The Lord of the Rings. We discover we are dealing with a dynamic duo of the forest. A Kinoshimobe, which is like a buff, vengeful Groot, and a Juboko tree, which feeds on human blood. To defeat this force of nature, the team needs to play dirty. Literally, Rosalie whips up a foul-smelling chemical cocktail to weaken the plant monster. They return to the woods at night, armed to the teeth with chainsaws and shotguns. The plan nearly goes south when Rosalie's car breaks down, making her the perfect bait. The monster attacks, trapping everyone in anime-style tentacle vines, and things get ugly. But Nick, using his Grimm punk axe, manages to hit the Kinoshimobe dead on, causing it to bleed chlorophyll everywhere. The Juboko tree, realizing its guardian is done for, pulls his body inside itself. The team flees, thinking they've won, but the camera focuses on the tree opening its eyes. Nature is watching, and it holds a grudge. Eve decides that reading books isn't cutting it and wants to cross to the other side of the mirror using blood magic, ignoring any sense of self-preservation. While she plans this suicide mission, Nick and Hank have a sad mystery to solve. Elderly people are being attacked, but the culprit seems to be a serial killer operating in nursing homes. The twist? It's not malice, it's mercy. We discover that Vessin with dementia undergo involuntary and dangerous Volgs. Enter the Gevatter Todd, an insect-like Vessin acting as an angel of death, euthanizing the elderly so they don't hurt themselves or others. It's a heavy episode, showcasing the difficult human side of the Vessin world. Nick follows the case of an elderly man who no longer recognizes his wife and is terrorizing the neighborhood. Instead of arresting the killer, Nick understands his role in the community and lets the doctor do what needs to be done. In a rare moment of compassion over combat. But the highlight is the ending. Eve goes to the spice shop alone, determined to solve the mirror mystery. She cuts herself, uses the blood as a key, and in a scene worthy of Stranger Things, the glass turns into a liquid portal. Without a second thought, she crosses into the other world, leaving us with a massive cliffhanger about where the hell she went and what she's going to find on the other side. Nick tiptoes into the loft, but the tension is already thick. Adeline reveals that their daughter, Diana, basically controlled Renard to kill Bonaparte. Just your average psychic child assassin stuff. Meanwhile, at Monroe's house, a horror movie scenario is unfolding. Blood on the mirror, and Eve is missing. We find out Eve pulled an Alice in Wonderland and went through the looking glass, except the place she ended up is more like an upside down full of monsters. Nick, being the stubborn hero he is, uses the magic stick to pass through the portal as well, but the stick is repelled as he goes through. On the other side, physics doesn't work right, and Vessens stay permanently transformed. Nick saves Eve from some creatures, and they find a village of humans who barely speak his language. There, they discover the local boss is the Zerstor, a guy with a skull face who is apparently the Vessen version of the devil and wants Diana as a bride. It's bizarre. In a moment of calm before the storm, Eve drops an emotional bomb on Nick. She doesn't want to be saved and finally accepts who she is now, telling Nick to stop blaming himself for what happened to Juliet. The tender moment ends when the ground shakes and the Zerstor shows up, slamming his staff on the ground. The creature is bulletproof and forces Eve to complete her transformation into a Hexen beast. All hell breaks loose in the mirror dimension. Eve and Nick try everything against the Zerstor, but Skullface is way too overpowered. Meanwhile, in our world, Diana makes the mistake of opening the portal because she heard the adults fighting. Nick and Eve manage to escape back to Monroe's house, but the villain hitches a ride in the vacuum. Upon arriving on Earth, the Zerstor sheds his monster form and turns into a handsome, naked blonde guy, looking like an evil Thor, and starts terrorizing a gas station. The gang discovers that the magic stick Nick carries is actually a piece of this villain's staff, and that's exactly what he's hunting. Nick hides Adeline and the kids in a remote cabin, exchanging vows of love and all that, while chaos reigns in the city. The Zerstor goes to the precinct and commits a massacre. He drops cop after cop with just a look and his staff. Wu, our favorite werewolf, tries to attack and dies instantly. Hank unloads his gun into the villain's chest, but it doesn't even tickle him, and he is killed as well. The episode ends with Nick being thrown against the wall, surrounded by the bodies of his friends. The endgame vibe is very real. If you thought it was bad, it just got worse. The Zerstor decimated the precinct. Nick tries to heal Wu and Hank with the stick, but they're gone. The villain vanishes, and Trouble arrives to help, suggesting the old cut off his head tactic, while the gang tries to brew a super potion at the spice shop. The Zerstor appears there and forces Eve to kill herself with her own dagger. Another one down. Nick races to the cabin where the rest of the team is, but the villain arrives right behind him, like Thanos collecting Infinity Stones. It's a slaughter. He kills Renard, Adeline, Rosalie, and Monroe in a matter of seconds. Only Nick, Trouble, and the kids are left. The villain makes an indecent proposal. If Nick hands over the stick, he will revive everyone. Nick wavers, but Trouble won't let him make that mistake, and the two fight. Just when all seems lost, the ghosts of Nick's mom, Kelly, and Aunt Marie appear. It's the most epic Grimm family reunion in history. The four Grimms pummel the villain, cut off his arm, and Nick finishes the job. With the staff complete, Nick is pulled into a portal that resets the timeline. He returns to the moment he stepped out of the mirror in the previous episode. Everyone is alive. No one remembers anything, only Diana and Nick. 20 years later, we see Nick and Adeline's son Kelly writing in the Grimm diaries. Diana enters the room with her eyes glowing purple, grabs the staff, and they head out to hunt Vessen. The legacy continues.